The rifle barrel trembled in her hands. Target 300 meters downrange. Wind from the east. Her finger brushed the trigger, then froze. She missed. Again. The drill instructor's voice cracked like a whip across Fort Carson's firing range. "You're done, Carter." 23 days of training, 0 qualifying scores, the platoon's worst shooter. But here's what nobody knew. Maya Carter had been a national precision shooting champion at 17, state tactical pistol winner, long-range rifle record holder. She could thread a bullet through a keyhole at 800 meters. So why was she failing every single test? Because 3 weeks ago, during her first combat scenario drill, she'd realized something that made her blood run cold. She was terrifyingly good at killing people, and that realization had shattered everything she thought she knew about herself. Now, as she packed her duffel bag to go home in disgrace, a stranger in an unmarked uniform appeared in her barracks doorway. "Private Carter," he said quietly, "your real training starts tonight." Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. Now, let's dive in. The Colorado sun beat down on Fort Carson's Range 14 like a hammer on an anvil. Heat shimmered off the concrete firing positions, turning the distant targets into wavering mirages. Maya Carter stood at position 7, the same spot she'd occupied for 3 weeks straight, the same spot where her military career was currently dying a slow, humiliating death. Her M4 carbine felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Targets at 300 meters, Drill Sergeant Marcus Reeves barked, his voice carrying that particular edge of disgust he reserved especially for her. "Shooters, you have 30 seconds to engage. On my mark." Maya's hands were already shaking. She pressed the stock into her shoulder, trying to remember everything she'd deliberately forgotten. Sight picture, breathing, trigger control, all the muscle memory she'd spent years building, now locked away behind a wall of fear she'd constructed herself. "Mark!" The crack of gunfire erupted down the line. Brass casings clinked onto concrete. The sharp smell of cordite filled the air. Maya squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked. The target 300 meters away remained untouched. She fired again. Another miss. And again. The steel plate mocked her with its silence. No satisfying ping of impact, just the whistle of rounds disappearing into the dirt berm beyond. When the ceasefire command came, Maya lowered her weapon with trembling hands and waited for the inevitable. Sergeant Reeves walked the line, checking targets through his binoculars. He paused at each position, calling out scores. "Morrison, 7 hits. Chen, 8 hits. Jackson, 6 hits." Then he reached position 7. The pause lasted 3 full seconds. "Carter?" His voice could have cut steel. "0, again." A few recruits down the line snickered. Maya heard someone whisper, "How the hell did she even pass MEPS?" Reeves moved directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the disgust carved into the lines of his weathered face. "Private Carter, in 23 days of basic training, you have not qualified on a single weapons system. Not one. You are a safety hazard, a liability, and an embarrassment to this platoon." Maya kept her eyes forward, jaw clenched. "You're done," Reeves said flatly. "Report to Company HQ after chow. They'll process your separation paperwork." The words hit like a physical blow. Maya felt 30 pairs of eyes on her back as she cleared her weapon and walked off the line. Failure. Just like everyone always predicted. The mess hall was a concrete box filled with the clatter of trays and the low rumble of exhausted conversations. Maya sat alone at a corner table, staring at a plate of food she had no intention of eating. Her duffel bag was already half-packed back in the barracks. By this time tomorrow, she'd be on a bus heading back to Philadelphia, back to her mother's disappointed face, back to her brother's knowing smirk. "Told you the Marines would chew you up." Her recruiting officer had painted such a clear picture. Honor, purpose, becoming part of something bigger than herself. She'd enlisted to prove she wasn't the screw-up her family thought she was. Instead, she'd just confirmed every doubt they'd ever had. "Mind if I sit?" Maya looked up. The man standing beside her table wasn't wearing the standard drill instructor's campaign cover. Instead, he wore woodland camouflage utilities with no name tape, no unit insignia, nothing but the silver oak leaves of a lieutenant commander on his collar. He was maybe 40, with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd spent more time in combat zones than behind a desk. His eyes were what caught her attention, sharp, analytical. The eyes of someone who saw through pretense like glass. Uh, sure, sir, Maya said automatically, straightening despite herself. The officer sat down across from her, setting a plain manila folder on the table between them. He didn't touch his own food tray. Instead, he studied her with the intensity of a diagnostician examining a patient. "I'm Commander Elias Grant," he said quietly. His voice had a strange quality, calm but weighted, like every word had been carefully chosen. "And you and I need to have a very interesting conversation about your spectacular failure rate." Maya's stomach dropped. "Sir, if this is about my discharge paperwork, it's not." Grant opened the folder. Maya's breath caught. Inside were photographs. Competition medals, news clippings, score sheets, all of them from her life before the Marines. "Maya Elizabeth Carter," Grant read aloud, his tone almost conversational. "National Junior Precision Rifle Champion, age 17. Pennsylvania State Tactical Pistol Gold Medalist, age 16. East Coast Long Range Rifle Record Holder. Youngest person to achieve a confirmed hit at 1,243 meters during civilian competition." He looked up from the file. "That was you, wasn't it?" The mess hall noise seemed to fade into static. Maya's pulse hammered in her ears. "Those were just sport competitions," she said carefully. "Years ago." "Sport competitions," Grant repeated, flipping through more pages. "Right. Let's see, expert classification in 3 separate shooting disciplines by age 18. Perfect scores in every qualification round you ever entered. Recruited by 2 separate Olympic development programs." He closed the folder with a soft thump. "So explain something to me, Private Carter. How does someone with world-class marksmanship fail every single shooting test in basic training? And I mean every single one. Rifle qualification? Failed. Pistol qualification? Failed. Combat marksmanship? Failed so badly your drill instructor thought you might be vision impaired." Maya opened her mouth, closed it. Her prepared lies suddenly felt paper-thin. Grant leaned forward slightly. "I've reviewed the range footage from your qualification attempts," he said. "And you want to know what I noticed? Your fundamentals are textbook perfect. Stance, grip, sight alignment, all exactly as trained. But right before you pull the trigger," he mimicked a slight tremor with his hand, "you flinch, every single time, almost like you're deliberately throwing the shot." The accusation hung in the air between them. Maya felt something crack inside her chest. 3 weeks of lying, of pretending to be incompetent, of burying everything she'd once been proud of. It all came pressing down at once. "Because I did," she said quietly. Grant's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "You deliberately failed." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Maya looked down at her untouched food. The words felt like they'd been stuck in her throat for weeks. "Week 2 of training," she said finally. "We did our first combat scenario drill. Pop-up targets in a mock village. Some of them were hostiles, some were civilians. We were supposed to make split-second decisions." Grant waited. "I got a perfect score," Maya continued. Her voice had gone flat, emotionless. 12 targets, 12 hits, no civilians hit, fastest time in the platoon. "That sounds like success." "That's what I thought too, until I was lying in my rack that night, replaying it in my head." Maya's hands clenched into fists on the table, and I realized something that scared the hell out of me. "What?" She looked up and met his eyes directly. I didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. The targets popped up, and I just neutralized them. Smooth, efficient, like I'd done it 1,000 times before. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I'm really, really good at killing people, Commander." And that realization made me understand I had no idea who I actually was. The mess hall clatter continued around them, oblivious. Grant sat back slowly, his expression thoughtful. "So you started failing on purpose." "If I couldn't trust myself with that ability," Maya said, "then I had no business being here." For a long moment, Grant said nothing. Then he reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a second folder, this one stamped with red letters, classified. Maya's heartbeat kicked up. "Private Carter," Grant said, "what if I told you that everything you just described, the fear, the self-doubt, the questioning of your own capability, is exactly what we've been looking for?" "We?" Grant slid the classified folder across the table. "Open it." With trembling hands, Maya broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of orders, dense with military terminology and authorization codes. But 3 lines stood out. Immediate reassignment, Special Operations Development Command, Tactical Research Division, Alpha Project. "What is this?" Maya breathed. "Your current training ends today," Grant said. "This is an invitation to something else entirely." "Special operations? Sir, I can't even pass basic rifle qual." "I don't want you for conventional special operations," Grant interrupted. "I want you for a program that officially doesn't exist." He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to a tone that made it clear this conversation would never be acknowledged outside this room. "For the last 6 years, my command has been recruiting a very specific type of operator. Not the biggest, not the fastest, not the ones who score highest on traditional metrics." He paused. "We recruit people with rare psychological profiles. Operators capable of exceptional violence who are also capable of questioning the cost of that violence." Maya felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. "Your failure wasn't random, Private Carter. We've been watching you since the moment you stepped off the bus at reception. Your drill instructors were instructed to pressure you, to create stress scenarios, to see how you'd respond when pushed to your limits. You knew I was failing on purpose?" "We suspected," Grant corrected. "Your background screening flagged your competition history. When you started tanking every qual, we knew we'd found what we were looking for." His eyes were intense now. "Most people with your level of skill would never question it. They'd embrace it, weaponize it, turn it into an identity. But you scared yourself. That kind of self-awareness is rarer than perfect marksmanship." Maya's mind reeled. "Why would you want that?" "Because the operators we develop don't fight wars, Private Carter. We prevent them. We operate in the gray spaces where traditional military force is too blunt an instrument. And in those spaces, the ability to pull a trigger is nowhere near as important as knowing when not to." He tapped the orders with one finger. "The question is whether you're willing to find out what you're actually capable of when you stop running from yourself." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training fields. Maya could hear the distant cadence of recruits running in formation, the sharp commands of drill instructors, the rhythmic percussion of boots on pavement, all the familiar sounds of a world she thought she was leaving. But Commander Grant was offering her something else entirely, a chance to step into shadows, to become something the world would never acknowledge. "If I refuse?" she asked. "You go home tomorrow. Honorable discharge for failure to meet training standards. No one will ever know what you were truly capable of." Grant's expression was neutral, but his eyes held a challenge. "You'll be safe, normal, exactly what you thought you wanted. And if I accept? Report to Tactical Range Delta at 1900 hours. Full combat gear. Live ammunition authorized." He stood, collecting both folders. "Fair warning, Private Carter. What we do is not easier than basic training. It's exponentially harder. But if you're tired of being afraid of yourself..." He left the sentence unfinished. Maya sat alone at the table, staring at the empty space where the classified orders had been. Around her, recruits laughed and complained about the day's training, blissfully unaware that their reality and hers had just diverged completely. She thought about her mother's disappointment, her brother's mockery, the recruiter's promises. 3 weeks of deliberate failure. And then she thought about that moment in the combat scenario, the split-second decisions, the perfect accuracy, the cold efficiency that had terrified her. Maybe running from it wasn't the answer. Maybe understanding it was. Maya stood up, her untouched tray forgotten. She had 3 hours to decide who she was going to become. At 1847 hours, Maya stood outside a building she'd passed 100 times without noticing. It looked like a standard maintenance facility, corrugated metal siding, a few small windows, a sign that read HVAC Maintenance, authorized personnel only. But the security camera above the door was military grade, and the card reader beside the entrance was the same type used on classified facilities. She was wearing full combat gear as instructed. A CH helmet, plate carrier loaded with ceramic plates, belt with mag pouches and a dump pouch. The works. Her M4 was loaded with live rounds, something that never happened during basic training without extensive safety briefings. At exactly 1900 hours, the door unlocked with an electronic click. Maya pulled it open and stepped into darkness. The interior hallway was nothing like she expected. LED strips provided low tactical lighting. The walls were reinforced concrete. Security cameras tracked her movement. This wasn't a maintenance facility. This was a hardened operations center. At the end of the hallway, another door stood open, spilling light across the floor. Maya walked forward, her boots silent on the rubberized flooring. The door led to an observation room overlooking an indoor range that stretched farther than any training facility she'd ever seen. The space was massive, easily 200 meters long, with multiple levels, movable walls, and target systems that looked like they cost more than her hometown's entire police budget. Waiting in the observation room was Commander Grant and a woman in full combat gear. The woman was maybe 35, with the lean, coiled build of someone who treated physical training like religion. Her eyes were dark and sharp, and she studied Maya with the same analytical intensity Grant had shown. "Private Carter," Grant said, "this is Chief Warrant Officer Lena Torres. She's going to be evaluating you tonight." Torres stepped forward and extended her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "You can call me Torres," she said. Her voice had a slight accent, Mexican border region, maybe Texas. "Commander Grant has told me about your interesting performance over the past 3 weeks." "Yes, ma'am," Maya said, then caught herself. "I mean, Chief." Torres smiled slightly. "Chief works. Let's talk about what happens next." She gestured to the range below. "This facility is used for advanced tactical training and operator evaluation. Tonight, we're going to see what you're actually capable of when you stop sabotaging yourself." Maya felt her stomach tighten. "I don't know if I can—" "You can," Torres interrupted. "The question is whether you will." Grant spoke up from behind them. "Private Carter, you've spent 3 weeks proving you can fail. Now prove you can succeed. No judgment, no consequences. Just you, the weapon, and the truth about who you are." Torres moved to a control panel and started activating systems. Below, the range came alive. Lighting shifted, target systems powered up, and a series of steel plates descended from the ceiling at varying distances. "We'll start simple," Torres said. "Static targets, no time pressure. Just show me your fundamentals." She gestured to a door leading down to the range floor. Maya's hands were shaking again, but this time it felt different. Not the tremor of self-sabotage, but the tremor of something long suppressed finally being released. She descended the stairs and stepped onto the range floor. The air smelled like gun oil and fresh concrete. The lighting was perfect, bright enough to see clearly, but positioned to eliminate glare on the targets. She approached the firing line and looked down range. Steel plates at 25 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters, all the way out to what looked like 400 meters at the far end. Torres's voice came through speakers overhead. "Weapon hot. Engage targets at your own pace. Start close, work your way out." Maya raised her M4 and settled into her stance. For 3 weeks, she'd fought against every instinct she had. Now, alone on this range with no one watching but 2 people who already knew her secret, she let those instincts surface. The first shot surprised her with its smoothness. The trigger broke clean. The recoil impulse traveled straight back. And 25 meters downrange, a steel plate rang like a bell. She shifted to the next target. Another perfect hit. Then the 50-meter plates. 3 rounds, 3 hits. Her breathing steadied, her hands stopped shaking. This was who she'd been before fear took over. She worked methodically through the array, each shot placed with surgical precision. By the time she reached the 200-meter plates, she'd fallen into a rhythm that felt like coming home. Acquire target, sight alignment, smooth trigger press, impact. When the last plate fell, she lowered her weapon and realized her heart rate had actually dropped. She wasn't anxious. She was calm. For the first time in 3 weeks, she felt like herself. "Reload," Torres's voice commanded. "Moving targets, 30 seconds." The range transformed. The static plates retracted, and new target systems emerged, motorized silhouettes that moved laterally across the range at varying speeds and distances. Maya loaded a fresh magazine. The targets started moving. She engaged them smoothly, leading her shots, adjusting for angular velocity. Each target dropped when hit, only to reset and continue moving. The challenge ramped up, faster movement, unpredictable patterns, multiple targets appearing simultaneously. Maya adapted without thinking. Her brain shifted into a mode she recognized from competitions. Analytical, precise, almost detached. Time seemed to slow. Each target became a geometry problem solved in milliseconds. When the drill ended, every target had been hit multiple times. Torres's voice held a new note of interest. Combat scenario. Hostile and civilian mix. Rules of engagement: hostiles only. Civilians are a fail. The range reconfigured again. This time, the targets were photorealistic, human silhouettes in various poses and clothing. Some held weapons, some held phones, some had their hands up. Red lights began strobing. A siren wailed. The scenario started. Targets popped up randomly. A gunman behind cover, a civilian running with hands raised, a hostile aiming from a window, a child holding a soccer ball. They appeared and disappeared in seconds, forcing split-second decisions. Maya moved through the scenario like water flowing around rocks. Her weapon tracked from threat to threat with mechanical efficiency. Hostile. Engage. Civilian. Hold fire. Hostile. Engage. Ambiguous. Hold, assess, decision, engage, or bypass. By the time the scenario ended, she'd engaged 12 hostile targets with 12 hits and hadn't fired a single round at a civilian. Perfect score. Just like the drill that had scared her 3 weeks ago. But this time, standing in the aftermath with her rifle still at the ready, Maya felt something different. Not fear. Understanding. She lowered her weapon and looked up at the observation window. Torres and Grant were watching her with expressions she couldn't quite read. The door opened and Torres descended to the range floor. She walked up to Maya and stood there for a long moment, just studying her. "How do you feel?" Torres asked. Maya considered the question honestly. "Like I just remembered something I'd forgotten about myself." "And what's that?" "That being good at something dangerous isn't the same as being dangerous." Torres nodded slowly. "Commander Grant wasn't exaggerating," she said. "You're exceptionally skilled. That much was obvious from your record. But skill alone doesn't qualify you for this program." Maya's chest tightened. "Then what does?" "What you just demonstrated in that combat scenario," Torres replied. 12 hostile targets, 12 hits, 0 civilian casualties. But more importantly, she gestured to Maya's firing position. "I watched you hesitate 3 times. Micro-hesitations, maybe a quarter second each. Most shooters would never pause. They'd engage anything that looked remotely like a threat." "The teenager with the phone could have been filming," Maya said quietly. "The man with the bag could have been carrying groceries. The woman in the window could have been trying to escape." "Exactly." Torres's expression was intense. "That hesitation? That split second where you question your own judgment? That's the difference between an operator and a weapon. We have plenty of weapons, Private Carter. What we need are operators who understand the difference." Grant's voice came through the speakers. "Torres, bring her up." They climbed back to the observation room, where Grant was reviewing data on multiple monitors. Maya could see her performance metrics displayed in real time. Shot placement, reaction times, decision accuracy, even biometric data tracking her heart rate and stress levels. "Private Carter," Grant said, turning to face her. "What Torres just put you through was a condensed version of our initial operator assessment. Most candidates train for months before they're ready to attempt it. You just walked in cold and scored in the 97th percentile." Maya didn't know what to say. "But scores aren't why you're here," Grant continued. "You're here because 3 weeks ago, when you realized how effective you were at violence, your first instinct was fear, not pride, not excitement. Fear." He paused. "That's the psychological profile we're looking for." Torres pulled up a chair and gestured for Maya to sit. "Let me explain what we actually do," she said. "This program, officially designated Special Activities Development Research, though we just call it the project, was created 6 years ago to address a specific problem in modern conflict." Grant took over. "Traditional special operations are designed for direct action, kill or capture high-value targets, raid enemy positions, surgical strikes. They're excellent at what they do. But increasingly, our biggest threats aren't military. They're asymmetric, ideological. They live in the spaces between nations, between laws, between what's military action and what's law enforcement." "We needed a different kind of operator," Torres said. "Someone who could operate in those gray spaces. Someone with the capability for extreme violence, but also the judgment to prevent violence from being necessary in the first place." Maya's mind raced. "You're talking about intelligence work." "Intelligence is part of it," Grant said, "but also diplomacy, psychology, cultural expertise, advanced technology skills, all combined with world-class tactical capability. We recruit operators who can have coffee with a warlord in the morning and rappel into a hostile facility at night. People who can build relationships and burn buildings, who can talk someone off a ledge or put them in the ground. He gestured to the range below. Your marksmanship makes you capable of the second part, but your fear of that capability makes you potentially capable of the first. Torres leaned forward. Here's what I'm authorized to offer you, Private Carter. If you accept assignment to this program, your basic training ends immediately. You'll enter an 18-month selection and training pipeline that will be the hardest thing you've ever attempted. Language immersion, advanced tactical training, intelligence craft, urban operations, psychological conditioning, every skill necessary to operate alone in denied areas. If you complete the pipeline, Grant added, you'll be assigned to a small team of operators who work on problems that officially don't exist. You'll have no public profile, no official record of your operations, no recognition, no award ceremonies. No one will ever know what you do. And if I fail the pipeline? Maya asked. Honorable discharge, Torres said. No penalties, no stigma. We'll even fabricate a conventional service record so future employers won't ask questions. Maya looked between them. Why me? You said you've been recruiting for 6 years. You must have hundreds of candidates who are better qualified. We've graduated 43 operators total, Grant said quietly. We screen thousands of candidates, most wash out in the first week. Not because they lack skills, but because they lack the psychological flexibility to question their own certainty. He met her eyes. You questioned yourself the moment you realized your own capability. That's incredibly rare. Outside the observation window, the massive range sat silent, waiting. Maya thought about Philadelphia, about her mother's kitchen where she'd signed her enlistment papers, about her brother's skeptical face, about the recruiter who'd promised her purpose. She thought about 3 weeks of deliberate failure, and she thought about the last 4 hours, the feeling of competence returning, the clarity of perfect execution, the strange peace she'd felt when everything aligned. How long do I have to decide? She asked. Grant and Torres exchanged glances. You already decided, Torres said gently. The moment you showed up tonight in full combat gear, weapons hot, ready to face what you'd been running from. She smiled. Now you're just negotiating with yourself about whether to admit it. Maya felt a laugh bubble up, surprised, slightly hysterical. That obvious? I've done this 43 times, Torres said. You all have the same look when you realize there's a door that's been closed your whole life, and someone just offered you the key. Grant pulled out a tablet and brought up a digital form. This is an assignment, acceptance, and security clearance agreement. If you sign, you'll be transferred to Project Authority immediately. You'll begin initial screening tomorrow morning at 0500. Your basic training platoon will be told you were medically separated. All records of this conversation will be classified. He handed her the tablet. Maya stared at the screen. The cursor blinked in the signature field. One tap, and she'd step into a world that officially didn't exist. One tap, and she'd stop running from the person she was afraid to be. Her finger hovered over the screen. She thought about that combat scenario 3 weeks ago, the one that had broken her certainty, the one where she'd moved through threats with cold precision and then lain awake terrified of her own capability. But tonight, she'd run that same scenario again. And this time, she understood something she hadn't before. The fear wasn't a warning that she was dangerous. The fear was proof that she could be trusted with danger, because the truly dangerous people never question themselves at all. Maya signed. The screen flashed green, assignment accepted. Grant took the tablet back. Welcome to the project, Candidate Carter. Torres will escort you to your new billeting. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we find out if you're actually as tough as your file suggests. Torres stood and headed for the door. Maya followed, her mind still processing everything that had happened in the last 4 hours. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. Commander Grant? He looked up from his monitors. Thank you, Maya said quietly, for seeing what I couldn't. Grant's expression softened slightly. Thank me after you survive the next 18 months. Torres? Sir? Don't go easy on her. Torres grinned. Wouldn't dream of it, sir. They walked through the facility's corridors in silence. Torres led Maya past classified briefing rooms, armories stocked with weapons Maya didn't recognize, and training spaces designed for scenarios she couldn't imagine. Finally, they reached a small dormitory wing. Torres opened a door to reveal a simple room, bunk, desk, locker, nothing fancy. Home for now, Torres said. You'll move to the main training facility next week. For now, you're in isolation until your clearance is processed. Maya set her rifle in the wall rack and started removing her gear. Can I ask you something, Chief? Shoot. Earlier, you said you've done this 43 times. How many of those candidates actually made it through the pipeline? Torres was quiet for a moment. 43. Maya froze. Wait, you mean everyone I've made this offer to has completed the program, Torres confirmed. Because I only make the offer when I'm certain they'll succeed. The real selection happens before this conversation, not after. Then why the 18-month pipeline? Because knowing you have the capability is different from proving it to yourself, Torres said. The training isn't about weeding people out. It's about building them up, giving them tools, skills, knowledge, showing them what they're actually capable of when they stop limiting themselves. She moved to the door, then paused. Get some sleep, Carter. Tomorrow we start teaching you a language you've never heard, show you technology you didn't know existed, and put you through tactical scenarios that'll make tonight's range drill look like a warm-up. You're going to hate me for about 3 months, then you're going to understand why we do it this way. I don't hate easy, Chief. Torres smiled. Good. Neither do I. She left, the door clicking shut behind her. Maya sat on the edge of the bunk, still processing. 24 hours ago, she'd been the platoon failure, packing her bags to go home in disgrace. Now she was a candidate in a program that officially didn't exist, about to embark on training that would remake her completely. She thought about her mother, her brother, the life she'd left behind in Philadelphia. They'd never know what happened to her after tonight. And somehow, that felt exactly right. Because the best victories weren't the ones that made headlines. They were the ones that prevented headlines from needing to be written. Maya lay back on the bunk and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, her real training began. Tonight, for the first time in 3 weeks, she slept without fear. At 0500 hours, her door crashed open. On your feet, candidate! Maya jolted awake to find Torres standing in the doorway, already in combat gear, holding a rucksack that looked like it weighed 80 pounds. Welcome to day 1, Torres said with a grin that promised pain. Hope you enjoyed your sleep. It's the last full night you'll get for the next 6 months. Maya rolled out of the bunk, her body moving on autopilot. Full combat gear, ruck loaded to 50 pounds. Formation in 15 minutes. Torres tossed the rucksack at her. And Carter? Yeah, Chief? The range drill last night? That was the easy part. She disappeared into the hallway. Maya looked at the rucksack, then at the combat gear she'd just taken off 7 hours ago. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that she could still walk away. That this was insane. That she was signing up for a world of classified operations and invisible wars in a life that couldn't exist on any official record. But a louder voice, the one that had been silent for 3 weeks while she failed on purpose, that voice was finally awake again. And it was ready. Maya started gearing up, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, because she'd spent her whole life being afraid of who she might become. Now she was about to find out. 14 minutes later, Maya stood in formation outside a building she'd never seen on any base map. Her rucksack dug into her shoulders with precisely calibrated misery, 50 pounds of weight distributed to create maximum discomfort over extended movement. Her combat gear was already soaked with sweat, despite the pre-dawn cold. She wasn't alone. 5 other candidates stood in the formation, all wearing the same blank expression of people who'd just realized they'd volunteered for something that might break them. 4 men, 1 other woman. Nobody spoke. Nobody made eye contact. Torres paced in front of them like a wolf evaluating prey. Welcome to Selection Phase 1, she announced. For the next 6 weeks, you will live, train, and operate as a candidate unit. Your instructors will evaluate everything: tactical proficiency, physical capability, psychological resilience, and most importantly, your ability to make decisions under extreme pressure. She stopped pacing and looked each candidate directly in the eyes. You were all recruited because you possess skills we need. But skills alone don't make operators. Judgment makes operators, and judgment is forged under stress. A tall candidate to Maya's left, probably 6'3", built like he'd played college football, shifted his weight slightly. Torres was on him instantly. Name? Candidate Briggs, Chief. You have something to say, Briggs? No, Chief? Then stand still. Briggs locked up, but Maya caught the flash of irritation in his eyes. Former athlete, probably used to being the best in the room. the kind of guy who'd spent his whole life having doors opened because of physical ability. She recognized the type because she'd competed against them in shooting sports, the ones who thought natural talent was enough, who'd never had to question whether their gifts came with responsibilities. Torres continued, "This program has a 100% graduation rate for candidates who reach this formation. That statistic is not a comfort. It means we've already decided you're capable. What remains to be seen is whether you're willing to become someone different than who you are right now." She gestured to a waiting truck. "Load up. We're moving to the training facility. No talking, no questions. You'll understand when we arrive." The facility was 2 hours north, buried in mountains that didn't appear on civilian maps. The truck wound through switchbacks and security checkpoints, each one more intimidating than the last. By the time they arrived, dawn had broken over peaks that looked like they'd been designed to break people. The compound itself was invisible until they were practically on top of it, a series of reinforced structures built into the mountainside, camouflaged so well that Maya only spotted them because of the blast doors that opened to receive the truck. Inside was a self-contained operations base, training ranges, kill houses, climbing walls, obstacle courses that looked like they'd been designed by sadists. And everywhere, the hum of advanced technology that had no business existing in the middle of nowhere. Torres led them to a briefing room where Commander Grant waited beside a tactical display showing a three-dimensional map of terrain Maya didn't recognize. "Candidates," Grant began without preamble, "welcome to Black Ridge Mountain Training Facility. For the next 6 weeks, this will be your entire world. You will not leave. You will not communicate with anyone outside. You will train, operate, and prove yourselves worthy of continuation." He gestured to the map. "Your first exercise begins in 4 hours. You'll be inserted into a denied area." He indicated a section of mountainous terrain. "With minimal equipment and a simple mission, reach the extraction point 40 miles away within 72 hours. Maya studied the map. 40 miles in 3 days didn't sound impossible until she noticed the elevation changes. They'd be climbing and descending the equivalent of scaling a skyscraper multiple times. "Rules of engagement," Grant continued. "You're operating in a hostile environment. Aggressor forces will be hunting you. If they tag you with simulated rounds, you fail. If you miss the extraction window, you fail. If you compromise operational security in any way that would expose your mission in a real-world scenario, you fail." Briggs spoke up without raising his hand. "What about working as a team, sir?" Grant's expression didn't change. "This exercise evaluates individual capability. You may encounter other candidates. You may choose to cooperate or compete. That decision reveals character." Torres stepped forward. "You have 4 hours to prepare. Study the terrain, plan your route, gather intelligence. At 1100 hours, you'll be blindfolded, driven to separate insertion points, and released. What happens after that is entirely up to you." She smiled, and it wasn't comforting. "Welcome to the pipeline, candidates. Try not to die." Maya spent the next 3 hours doing what she did best: obsessive preparation. She studied the topographical map until she could close her eyes and see the terrain. Primary route following ridgelines to avoid valleys where aggressor forces would concentrate. Secondary route using stream beds for concealment despite the slower movement. Tertiary route gambling on a direct approach that would be faster but completely exposed. The other candidates prepared differently. Briggs focused on physical conditioning, doing push-ups and stretches, like the main challenge was endurance. The other woman, Candidate Song, according to her name tape, pored over weather data and seasonal water sources. 2 of the male candidates huddled together, clearly planning to team up immediately. The 6th candidate, a wiry guy who looked maybe 25, sat alone cleaning an M4 with the methodical precision of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. Maya watched him work and recognized something. He wasn't preparing for an exercise. He was preparing for war. Former infantry, she guessed. Probably deployed. Probably seen things that made a mountain exercise feel like summer camp. At 10:55 hours, Torres reappeared. "Candidates, form up." They assembled in the vehicle bay. 6 trucks waited, engines running. 6 instructors stood ready, each holding a blackout hood. Torres addressed them one final time. "From this moment until extraction, you're alone. No support, no second chances. Show us what you're made of." An instructor approached Maya, hood in hand. "Good luck, Candidate Carter." The world went dark. But the hood came off 40 minutes later in terrain that looked nothing like the maps. Maya blinked against sudden brightness and found herself on a rocky hillside surrounded by pine trees. No vehicles in sight, no instructors, just her, a rucksack, and an M4 loaded with simulated rounds. A laminated card lay on a nearby rock. Insertion point Delta. Exfil grid 38.7442 minus 106.8891. Mission clock. Starts now. Maya checked her watch. 1,143 hours. 72 hours from now would be 1,143 hours on day 3. She pulled out her compass and map, quickly triangulating her position based on visible terrain features. She was 8 miles southeast of where she'd expected, which meant the route she'd planned was worthless. The direct approach would take her over a massive ridgeline that would expose her to anyone watching from high ground. The safe route would add 15 miles and might miss the extraction window. She was calculating odds when she heard it, the distant thump of rotor blades. The aggressor forces were already in play. Maya dropped into cover behind a boulder and watched a UH-60 Blackhawk sweep across the valley below. It wasn't looking for her specifically, not yet, but it was establishing a patrol pattern that would make movement during daylight suicidal. She made a decision. Move now while the helicopter was out of position. Cover as much ground as possible before it returned, then go to ground and wait for darkness. She was 3 miles into her movement when she found the first body. Not an actual body, a candidate tagged by aggressor forces, sitting dejectedly beside the trail with a red flag attached to his gear. It was one of the guys who'd planned to team up. He'd been eliminated within 2 hours. "They're everywhere," he muttered as Maya passed. "Thermal optics, motion sensors. It's impossible." Maya didn't respond. Talking to failed candidates wouldn't help her. She pushed deeper into the mountains, moving fast but carefully, always keeping cover between herself and likely observation points. The rucksack dug into her shoulders. Her boots found every rock, but she maintained pace, eating up miles while the sun climbed higher. At 15:30 hours, she went to ground in a dense thicket and waited. The helicopter made 3 more passes. Ground patrols moved through the valley below. She could hear their radios crackling in the distance. This wasn't a training exercise. This was a full-scale hunter-killer operation designed to teach candidates what real evasion felt like. As darkness fell, Maya allowed herself a cold meal from her ruck. Energy bar, water, nothing that required preparation. Then she checked her map one more time. 28 miles to extraction. 48 hours remaining. Doable, if nothing went wrong. She started moving at 2100 hours, using night vision to navigate terrain that would break ankles in daylight. The temperature dropped into the 30s. Her breath fogged the air. But darkness was her ally now. Thermal imaging worked both ways, and she knew how to minimize her heat signature. She made 12 miles before dawn, moving through terrain so rough that she had to hand-over-hand climb sections in complete darkness. By the time the sun rose, she was exhausted, filthy, and exactly where she needed to be, on the backside of a ridgeline that would hide her from aerial observation. She found a natural depression, covered it with vegetation, and settled into sleep. 3 hours later, voices woke her. Tracks heading west. Recent, maybe 4 hours old. Call it in. We'll pursue. Maya froze. Aggressor patrol, less than 50 meters away. They'd found her trail from the night movement. She had seconds to decide, stay hidden and hope they passed, or relocate and risk exposure. The voices grew closer. Thermal's picking up something. Could be wildlife, could be a candidate. Maya made her choice. She low-crawled out the back of her hide, moving with agonizing slowness through the underbrush. Every sound felt amplified. The rustle of fabric, the scrape of her rifle, her own controlled breathing. Movement! 11 o'clock! She abandoned stealth and ran. The simulated gunfire started immediately, the crack thump of training rounds passing overhead. Maya sprinted through terrain that wanted to kill her, ducking behind trees using every bit of cover. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed. A round impacted the tree beside her head, close enough that she felt the concussion. She dove into a ravine, rolled, came up running, and disappeared into a section of forest so dense the patrol couldn't follow without exposing themselves. The radio chatter faded behind her. Maya kept running for another mile before she finally stopped, chest heaving, checking for any sign of pursuit. Nothing. She'd evaded them. But now she was off course, burning energy she couldn't spare and still 20 miles from extraction. Day 2 was when Maya discovered what her body could actually endure. She moved through pain that would have stopped her a month ago. Blisters formed and popped and reformed. Her shoulders bled where the rucksack straps had rubbed them raw. Dehydration turned her mouth into sandpaper despite rationing water carefully. But she kept moving. At 1600 hours, she encountered another candidate. Song, the woman from the initial formation, was crouched beside a stream, refilling water bottles. She looked up as Maya approached, her expression wary. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Song gestured to the stream. "It's clean," tested it. Maya approached carefully, never quite relaxing. They were competitors, after all, but they were also both still in the exercise, which meant they were both competent. "How far out are you?" Song asked. 12 miles, Maya said, dropping to fill her bottles. "You?" "About the same. Different route." Song studied her. "You're Carter, right? The one Torres brought in from Basic?" Maya nodded. "Heard you failed every qual at Carson," Song continued, "then somehow ended up here. That must be an interesting story." "Not really," Maya said neutrally. Song smiled slightly. "You know what I was before this? FBI hostage rescue team. 5 years, 42 successful operations. Then I shot a hostage taker who was using a kid as a shield. Perfect shot. Severed his spinal cord. He dropped instantly. Kid was fine. But afterward..." She trailed off, looking at the water flowing past. "Afterward, I couldn't sleep," Song finished quietly. "Kept seeing his face. Kept running the scenario, wondering if there was another way. My team leader told me I was overthinking it, that the shot was righteous. But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe being that comfortable with killing meant something was wrong with me." Maya understood immediately. "So you started questioning yourself. And the FBI doesn't have a lot of use for agents who hesitate," Song said. "Torres found me 3 months after I resigned. Said she was recruiting people with my profile." She looked up. People who were too good at violence to ignore it, but too human to embrace it. They finished filling their bottles in silence. "The extraction point is in a valley," Song said finally, "completely exposed from high ground. They'll have it locked down tight. Any candidate who makes it that far will have to punch through a perimeter." "You planning something?" Song stood, shouldering her ruck. "I'm planning to get there first and observe their setup. Maybe find a weakness. If you happen to arrive around the same time..." She left the offer hanging. Maya considered. Teaming up violated the spirit of individual evaluation. But the exercise was designed to test judgment, and sometimes good judgment meant recognizing when cooperation was smarter than competition. "What time are you planning to arrive?" "Just before the extraction window. 1100 hours, day 3. Gives me time to scout without sitting exposed for hours." Maya nodded slowly. "See you there?" Song headed west. Maya waited 10 minutes, then continued north on her own route. The smart play was to approach separately, observe independently, and only cooperate if the tactical situation demanded it. But as she hiked through the afternoon heat, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Song had just given her a gift: information about the extraction point defenses, delivered in a way that built trust without creating obligation. It was exactly the kind of social engineering that would be essential in real operations. Maybe the exercise was testing more than just individual capability. Maybe it was testing whether they understood that lone wolves usually died alone. Day 3, 0530 hours. Maya reached the ridgeline overlooking the extraction valley with 6 hours to spare. The scene below made her stomach sink. The extraction point was a cleared area maybe 50 meters across. Helicopter landing zone, obviously. But surrounding it was a defensive perimeter that would make penetration almost impossible. Observation posts on every high point, roving patrols, and what looked like thermal imaging systems covering the approaches. This wasn't an exercise. This was a practical demonstration that even reaching the objective didn't guarantee success. Maya settled into a concealed position and started mapping the defenses. Guard rotations, patrol patterns, dead zones in the thermal coverage. She had 6 hours to find a weakness that might not exist. At 0830 hours, movement to her left caught her attention. Song appeared, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who'd done this for a living. She took position 50 meters from Maya, probably not knowing she was there, and began her own observation. Maya stayed still and watched. Over the next 2 hours, 3 more candidates appeared in the hills around the valley. Briggs, moving with surprising competence for someone she'd written off as just an athlete. The wiry infantry guy, who materialized out of terrain that should have been empty. And surprisingly, the second candidate who'd planned to team up, apparently he'd evaded elimination somehow. They all saw the same problem. The extraction point was a kill zone. At 10:45 hours, with less than an hour until the window opened, Briggs made his move. He simply stood up, raised his hands, and walked down the hillside toward the perimeter. Maya watched in disbelief as the aggressor forces intercepted him, checked his credentials, and let him through. He walked directly to the extraction point and sat down, waiting. The realization hit Maya like a fist. The perimeter wasn't there to keep them out. It was there to see if they'd recognize when stealth was the wrong approach. Briggs had understood something the rest of them had missed. Sometimes the best tactic was overt action. Song emerged from her hide and walked down, then the infantry guy. Both were processed through the perimeter and allowed to reach the extraction point. Maya stood slowly, her mind racing. The exercise wasn't about evasion. It was about knowing when to evade and when to present yourself openly, about reading the tactical situation and making the right call, even when it contradicted your training. She walked down the hillside, hands visible, moving confidently. An aggressor instructor intercepted her at the perimeter. "Candidate Carter, took you long enough." "Had to observe first," Maya said. The instructor smiled. "Smart." Briggs walked right in on instinct. You walked in on analysis. Both got the same result, but you know why it worked. That's the difference. He waved her through. Maya reached the extraction point at 1,057 hours, 16 minutes before the window opened. 4 candidates had made it. 2 had been eliminated during the exercise, probably for failing to reach the valley at all. Torres stood beside the landing zone, watching them with an expression Maya couldn't read. "Congratulations," she said when the last candidate arrived. "You've completed Phase 1, Exercise 1. You proved you can navigate terrain, evade pursuit, and reach an objective under pressure." She paused. But that was the easy part. The helicopter ride back to Blackridge was silent. The candidates were too exhausted to speak, too focused on processing what they'd just survived. Maya stared out the window at the mountains that had nearly broken her, feeling a strange sense of accomplishment mixed with the certainty that this was just the beginning. At the facility, they were given 4 hours to shower, eat, and rest, then back to formation for evaluation. Commander Grant addressed them in the same briefing room where the exercise had been introduced. 4 of 6 candidates completed the exercise, he said. Acceptable ratio. The 2 who failed will receive counseling and return to their original units. The rest of you advance to the next phase. He pulled up a new tactical display. For the next 3 weeks, you will undergo intensive language immersion. Candidate Carter, you've been assigned Pashto. Candidate Song, Mandarin. Candidate Briggs, Arabic. Candidate Martinez, the infantry guy, finally named, Russian. Maya felt her exhaustion deepen. Language immersion meant 12-hour days of classroom instruction followed by practical application. It meant rewiring her brain to think in different grammatical structures. It meant cultural education that went far beyond vocabulary. After language immersion, Grant continued, you'll move into advanced tactical training, close quarters battle, advanced marksmanship, demolitions, and specialized insertion techniques. Then intelligence craft, surveillance, counter-surveillance, social engineering, and psychological operations. He looked at each of them directly. You have 18 months to become operators. We've just used 3 days to prove you can walk 40 miles. The real work starts tomorrow. Torres stepped forward. Dismissed. Get some sleep. You'll need it. That night, lying in her bunk with muscles that screamed and blisters that wept, Maya replayed the exercise in her mind. She'd made it. Not because she was the fastest or the strongest or even the best trained. She'd made it because she'd done what she always did. Observed, analyzed, and made decisions based on understanding rather than assumption. The knock on her door came at 2200 hours. Enter, Maya called. Torres stepped in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Maya and sat in the desk chair. Thought you might want a debrief, Torres said. Maya sat up, wincing. I'm listening. You did well, made smart choices under pressure. The partnership overture with Song showed good judgment. You understood the value of information sharing without committing to full cooperation. Torres sipped her coffee. But I saw something else during your movement. Want to guess what? Maya thought back. I hesitated during the ravine sprint. Could have taken a more direct route out. You hesitated, Torres confirmed. Because you were calculating whether the direct route would expose you to sniper fire from the ridgeline. That calculation took maybe 2 seconds. Most candidates would have just run. You thought through the tactical geometry while under fire. Is that good or bad? It's both, Torres said. In some situations, analysis saves lives. In others, it gets you killed because you're thinking when you should be moving. Learning to know the difference is what the next 18 months are about. She set down her coffee and leaned forward. Carter, I'm going to tell you something I don't tell most candidates this early. You scare me a little. Maya blinked. What? Your technical proficiency is off the charts. Your judgment is solid. Your psychological profile suggests you'll handle the moral complexity of our operations better than most. Torres's expression was serious. But you have one weakness that could destroy you if you don't address it. What weakness? You're still afraid of yourself, Torres said quietly. You proved in that range drill that you can execute flawlessly, but you're always questioning whether you should. That questioning is valuable. It's why we recruited you. But if it becomes paralysis, it'll get you killed. Maya felt the words hit home. So what do I do? You learn to trust your judgment the same way you trust your marksmanship, Torres replied. You accept that being good at violence doesn't make you violent, that capability and intent are different things, that the world needs people who can do terrible things but choose not to unless absolutely necessary. She stood, collecting both coffee cups. Get some sleep, Carter. Tomorrow we start teaching you Pashto. And fair warning, the instructor is a former Mujahideen commander who learned English by interrogating Soviet prisoners. He's not gentle. Torres headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. That moment in the ravine when you calculated the sniper angles? That wasn't hesitation. That was battlefield geometry. Don't let anyone tell you that thinking makes you weak. In our world, thinking is what separates operators from corpses. She left. Maya lay back down, Torres's words echoing in her mind. You're still afraid of yourself. The truth was sharper than she wanted to admit. Even now, after proving her capability in the range drill and completing the mountain exercise, part of her still questioned whether someone with her skills should exist at all. But maybe that was exactly the point. Maybe the people who should never question their capability were the ones who most needed to be questioned. And maybe the ones who constantly questioned themselves were the only ones who could be trusted with power. Maya closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. Tomorrow, she'd start learning how to think in a language she'd never heard. But tonight, she'd learned something more important, that fear of your own strength wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. And in the world she was entering, a world of gray spaces and impossible choices and operations that would never be acknowledged, wisdom was the rarest weapon of all. The Pashto instructor walked into the classroom at 0600 hours, carrying a scarred leather bag and an expression that suggested he'd stopped caring about American sensibilities somewhere around 1987. His name was Hashim Wardak, and the first thing he did was throw the bag onto the table hard enough to make everyone jump. English is the language of tourists and conquerors, he announced in heavily accented but perfectly clear English. Pashto is the language of survivors. For the next 3 weeks, you will learn to think like someone who has buried their family, rebuilt their village, and still knows how to smile at strangers while planning 10 moves ahead. He pulled a worn AK-47 receiver from the bag and set it on the table. This is lesson 1. In Pashto, this is called a topak, but the word means more than gun. It means heritage. It means honor. It means the difference between being a man and being prey. His dark eyes swept the 3 candidates assigned to his course, Maya, Briggs, and a new arrival named candidate Holland. If you cannot understand the weight of words, you cannot understand the people who speak them. Maya realized immediately that this wasn't going to be traditional language instruction. This was cultural immersion designed to rewire how they processed reality. For 12 hours a day, Wardak drilled them in conversational Pashto, not textbook phrases, but the kind of language spoken in mountain villages where American drones circled overhead and trust was a currency more valuable than gold. He taught them how to negotiate for safe passage, how to insult someone's honor without triggering blood feuds, how to distinguish between a genuine invitation and a polite death sentence. You say Dera Manana, thank you very much, but your tone is wrong, Wardak corrected Maya on day 3. You sound like you're ordering coffee. In my language, gratitude carries obligation. If you thank someone incorrectly, You either insult them or bind yourself to repay a debt you don't understand. He made her repeat the phrase 50 times until the inflection carried proper weight. At night, after classroom instruction, they were required to maintain conversations entirely in Pashto. No English allowed. Maya lay in her bunk translating her thoughts into alien grammatical structures, feeling her brain slowly rewire itself. By week 2, she was dreaming in Pashto. By week 3, she understood what Wardak had meant about language being more than communication. It was a window into how entire populations process trust, honor, violence, and survival. On the final day of immersion, Wardak gave them a practical exercise. "You are in a village," he said, speaking only Pashto now. "The elder son has been killed by men you are hunting. The elder knows where these men are hiding. You must convince him to tell you without offering money, making threats, or revealing your true purpose. You have one conversation, fail, and your targets escape. Begin." Maya stepped into the role-play scenario set up in an adjacent room. The elder was another instructor wearing traditional clothing, his face weathered and suspicious. She approached with proper deference, touched her hand to her heart in greeting, and began to speak. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. Maya never mentioned the men she was hunting. Instead, she talked about honor, about the obligation of fathers to protect their sons' legacies, about how justice could be served without creating new cycles of revenge. She listened more than she spoke. She acknowledged grief without offering empty comfort, and slowly, carefully, she built a bridge between what she needed and what the elder wanted. When she walked out of the room, Wardak was waiting. "How did I do?" Maya asked in English, exhausted. Wardak smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. "He told you where the men are hiding," Wardak said. "But more importantly, he believes you will kill them in a way that honors his son's memory. That is the difference between information and trust." He handed her a certification document. "You are not fluent," he said. "Fluency takes years, but you understand the heart of the language. That is enough for what you will become." Advanced tactical training began the next day, and it made the mountain exercise feel like a nature hike. The kill house was a modular structure that could be reconfigured into hundreds of different layouts. Rooms appeared and disappeared. Hostiles and civilians populated spaces at random. Every scenario was designed to create split-second decisions with life or death consequences. The instructor was a former Delta Force operator named Chief Warrant Officer Kyle Brennan. He had a prosthetic left hand from an operation he'd never discuss and zero tolerance for hesitation. "Close quarters battle is where good operators become ghosts and bad operators become statistics," Brennan announced on day 1. "Speed matters. Violence of action matters. But judgment matters most. Because in the real world, the person you kill might be the only one who knows where the bomb is." He put them through scenarios that twisted Maya's understanding of combat. Hostage rescue, where the hostage was actually working with the captors. Terrorist interdiction, where the terrorist turned out to be an undercover asset. Building clearing, where the real threat wasn't armed combatants, but a chemical weapon rigged to detonate if disturbed. Maya learned to move through structures like water, fluid, adaptive, always seeking the path of least resistance. She learned to read micro-expressions on faces to distinguish genuine fear from deception. She learned that sometimes the best tactical solution was walking away from a fight you could win. On week 6, Brennan changed the rules. "Live ammunition," he announced. "Real-world stakes. You'll be clearing a building with actual explosives rigged throughout. Miss a tripwire, and you'll trigger a flashbang that'll leave you deaf for a week. Engage a civilian target, and you fail the entire course." The 4 remaining candidates, Maya, Song, Briggs, and Martinez, stood in the briefing room staring at him. "Is this legal?" Briggs asked. "Legal is a word lawyers use," Brennan replied. "This is effective, which matters more when you're operating in denied territory with no support, and the entire mission rests on your judgment." He pulled up a building schematic. The scenario: a weapons dealer is meeting with buyers in this compound. Your mission is to interdict the transaction, secure the weapons, and extract intelligence from the dealer's computer. Rules of engagement: dealer and buyers are hostile. Building staff are civilians unless they present a direct threat. Explosives are real. Ammunition is real. Consequences are real. Maya felt her pulse spike. This wasn't training anymore. This was controlled combat. "You have 2 hours to plan," Brennan said. "Then you execute as a 4-person team. Team leader will be decided by whoever presents the best tactical plan." Hobbit. They huddled over the schematic, each candidate seeing different solutions. Briggs wanted a fast, aggressive approach. Hit hard, overwhelm resistance, sort targets afterward. Martinez preferred methodical clearing, slow, careful, minimize risk. Song suggested a deception approach, create a distraction, split enemy attention, exploit the confusion. Maya studied the building layout and saw something the others had missed. "The meeting is happening on the second floor," she said, pointing to the schematic. "But the only structural support columns that could hold enough explosives to level the building are on the ground floor, which means the dealer has a dead man's switch." The others looked at her. "If we kill him before we find the switch," Maya continued, "the building collapses. If we trigger any of the tripwires, same result. And if we take too long clearing the first floor, the buyers complete the transaction and scatter." "So what's your solution?" Song asked. Maya traced a route on the schematic. "We don't clear the building at all. We split into two elements. Martinez and Briggs enter through the front, make noise, draw attention. Song and I fast rope onto the roof, breach from above, and hit the meeting room before they can react. We secure the dealer alive, neutralize the buyers, then we have time to locate and disable the dead man's switch while the ground element holds the perimeter." Briggs frowned. "That puts you and Song in the most danger." "It puts us in the fastest position," Maya corrected. "Speed eliminates the dead man's switch problem. Violence of action eliminates the buyer threat. And keeping the dealer alive gives us both the intelligence and the bomb solution." Martinez studied the plan. "It's risky. If the roof breach fails, you'll be trapped on the second floor with no exit. If the ground clearing fails," Maya countered, "we'll all be dead when the building collapses." Silence. Brennan had been watching from the doorway. "Candidate Carter, your team leader, brief your element and execute in 90 minutes. The building was real. An abandoned warehouse Blackridge had converted into a kill house that felt like stepping into an actual combat zone. Graffiti on the walls, debris in the corners, the smell of dust and decay. And somewhere inside, live explosives and hostile actors played by instructors with simulated rounds that would sting like hell if they hit. Maya stood on the roof with Song, both of them rigged for fast rope insertion. Below, Martinez and Briggs waited at the front entrance, ready to create chaos on her signal. Maya keyed her radio. "Ground element, status?" "Set," Martinez replied. His voice was calm, professional. "Former infantry showing through. On my mark, you have 30 seconds to make noise. Don't breach, just draw attention." Maya looked at Song. "We go the moment we hear gunfire." Song checked her harness one final time. "You know this is insane, right?" "Completely." Maya positioned herself over the roof hatch. "Ready?" "Ready." Maya keyed the radio. Execute. 3 seconds later, the sound of simulated gunfire erupted from the front of the building. Shouting. The crash of a flashbang. Martinez and Briggs were selling the distraction perfectly. Maya grabbed the fast rope and dropped. 4 seconds of controlled descent through darkness, then her boots hit the second floor landing. Song landed beside her a heartbeat later. They moved immediately, weapons up, clearing angles. The hallway was empty, but the sounds of chaos echoed from below. Maya pushed forward to the meeting room door, stacked on one side while Song took the other. Through the gap under the door, Maya could see shadows moving. Multiple hostiles. Active threat. She looked at Song and held up 3 fingers. 3 seconds. 2. 1. Maya kicked the door open and flooded into the room. The scene crystallized instantly. 3 men in suits around a table, all reaching for weapons. A 4th man, older, backing toward a laptop on a desk. The dealer. "Freeze!" Maya shouted, her weapon tracking targets. Nobody froze. The closest buyer raised a pistol. Maya's training took over. Double tap, center mass, target down. Song engaged the second buyer, dropping him before he could aim. The third buyer dove for cover behind a filing cabinet. But the dealer's hand was moving toward something in his jacket. The dead man's switch. Maya had maybe half a second to decide. Shoot him and risk triggering the explosives, or rush him and hope she was fast enough. She chose the third option. "Song, third buyer!" Maya sprinted across the room as the dealer's hand emerged from his jacket, not holding a detonator, but reaching for the laptop. She hit him with a tackle that would have made her brother proud, driving him away from the desk and onto the floor. Her weapon pressed against his head. "Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't even think." The dealer froze. Song cleared the filing cabinet. The third buyer was down, tagged by simulated rounds. Maya keyed her radio, her heart hammering. Ground element, second floor secure. 3 hostile actors neutralized. Dealer in custody. Sweep for explosives. Brennan's voice came through her earpiece. Hold position. Exercise is not complete. Maya's blood ran cold. What? Check the laptop, Carter. Still keeping her weapon on the dealer, Maya reached for the computer. The screen showed a countdown timer. 2 minutes, 14 seconds. It's a bomb trigger, Maya breathed. He was going to blow the building during the meeting. Not quite, Brennan said. Read the screen more carefully. Maya looked again. The countdown wasn't labeled detonation. It was labeled transmission. He's not destroying evidence, she realized. He's transmitting it. Weapons specifications, buyer identities, everything. In 2 minutes, it uploads to a remote server and disappears. So what do you do, Candidate Carter? Maya's mind raced. She could smash the laptop, but that might trigger a backup protocol. She could try to hack the transmission, but she had 0 computer skills in 90 seconds. She could extract the hard drive, but that might be rigged to wipe if disturbed. Or she could do what operators actually did in the field when technology got complicated. She grabbed the dealer by his collar and hauled him to his feet. Turn it off. I don't know how, the dealer said in accented English. The instructor was playing the role perfectly, defiant, stalling for time. Maya pressed her weapon harder against his ribs. You set the timer. You can stop it. Even if I wanted to, the protocol is automated. Once started, it cannot be... Maya shot him in the foot. The simulated round tagged his boot with a sharp crack. The dealer, the instructor, yelped and stumbled. Next one goes through your knee, Maya said, her voice flat. Then your elbow, then your other knee. I will disassemble you 1 joint at a time until you give me what I need. The timer says 90 seconds. I can cause a lot of damage in 90 seconds. The dealer stared at her, and for a moment Maya saw the instructor's real expression break through the role. Surprise? Maybe even respect. He reached for the laptop and typed a command. The timer stopped at 73 seconds. Maya keyed her radio. Ground element, transmission halted. Dealer is cooperating. Sweep the building and secure. Copy, Martinez replied. Breaching now. The next 5 minutes were a blur of activity. Martinez and Briggs cleared the ground floor, locating and disabling 3 separate explosive devices. Song secured the laptop and began downloading intelligence. Maya zip-tied the dealer and the 3 buyers who were actually just instructors wearing simulated hit markers. When Brennan finally entered the room, his expression was unreadable. Exercise complete, he announced. Debrief in 30 minutes. Good work, Carter. But Maya barely heard him. She was too busy processing what she'd just done. She'd shot an unarmed man to extract information under time pressure. In a training scenario, it was acceptable. Necessary, even. But in the real world, that kind of decision lived in the gray space between justice and brutality. And she'd made it without hesitation. The debrief was brutal in a different way. Brennan broke down every decision, every movement, every microsecond of the operation. He praised the team coordination and the creative tactical solution. He criticized their room-clearing technique and their radio discipline. But when he reached the moment Maya shot the dealer, he paused. Candidate Carter, explain your reasoning. Maya met his eyes. The timer was running. Verbal coercion wasn't working. Physical pain was the fastest method to break his resistance. You shot an unarmed detainee, Brennan said flatly. I shot a hostile actor who was actively engaged in intelligence transmission that would compromise the mission, Maya corrected. His armed status was irrelevant to the tactical problem. And if this had been a real operation, if that man was actually unarmed and you just violated the Geneva Conventions? The room went silent. Maya thought about the question, really thought about it. Then I'd have to live with that decision, she said quietly. But in that moment, with 73 seconds left and the entire mission at risk, I made the call that gave us the highest probability of mission success. If I'm wrong, I accept the consequences. But I won't apologize for making a decision under pressure. Brennan studied her for a long moment. Good answer, he said finally. Because here's what you just demonstrated. You understand that operators in our world don't have the luxury of perfect information or unlimited time. Sometimes you make choices that look wrong in hindsight, but were right in the moment. The question isn't whether you'll make those choices. It's whether you can live with the weight of them afterward. He pulled up footage from the exercise on a monitor. Your tactical solution was excellent. Your execution was near flawless. But what impressed me most was your ability to escalate violence precisely when necessary and no further. You shot him in the foot. Painful, attention-getting, but not permanently damaging. That showed restraint even in the moment of maximum aggression. He looked around the room at all four candidates. This is what separates operators from soldiers. Soldiers follow rules of engagement. Operators write new rules when the old ones don't fit. But you have to be smart enough to know when you're breaking rules for the right reasons and when you're just being a war criminal. He shut down the monitor. You've completed Phase 2. Tomorrow, you begin Intelligence Craft, the art of manipulating reality itself. Get some sleep. You'll need it. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment she'd pulled the trigger on the dealer. The cold calculation. The absence of hesitation. The way it had felt almost natural. 3 months ago, she'd been terrified of exactly this capability. Now she'd demonstrated it in front of instructors and teammates, and instead of fear, she felt clarity. Maybe Torres had been right. Maybe capability and intent really were different things. The knock on her door came at 2300 hours. "It's open," Maya called. Commander Grant entered, carrying a file folder she recognized as her training evaluation. "Mind if I sit?" "Of course, sir." Grant settled into the desk chair and opened the file. "I've been reviewing your performance over the past 3 months. Language immersion, excellent. Physical conditioning, top 10%. Tactical proficiency, exceptional. Psychological resilience." He looked up. "That's the interesting one." Maya waited. "Most candidates reach a breaking point somewhere in the pipeline," Grant said. "A moment where they realize what we're actually training them to become, and they have to decide if they can live with that identity. Usually happens around month 4 or 5. "I'm only at month 3, Maya said. "I know." Grant's expression was thoughtful. "Which is why I'm here. Because I think you already hit your breaking point, back at Fort Carson when you realized you were good at killing. Everything since then has been you learning to accept what you already knew about yourself." Maya felt the words land with uncomfortable accuracy. "The question is," Grant continued, "can you channel that capability into something that actually makes the world safer? Because skills without purpose just make you dangerous. Purpose without skills makes you irrelevant. But skills plus purpose?" He smiled slightly. "That's an operator." He pulled a document from the file. "This is an early deployment opportunity. Normally, we don't offer these until month 12. But we have a situation developing overseas that could benefit from a fresh perspective. Someone the enemy wouldn't expect. Someone who can blend, observe, and report without anyone realizing they're being evaluated." Maya's pulse quickened. "A real operation?" "An observation mission," Grant clarified. "You'd be attached to a diplomatic security detail in a denied area. Your official role would be administrative support. Your actual role would be assessing a target we're considering for more direct action. No combat, no authority to engage, just eyes and ears." "Why me?" "Because you're 3 months into an 18-month pipeline and you're already performing at the level of graduated operators," Grant said bluntly. "Because you proved tonight that you can make hard calls under pressure. And because the target we're assessing is a woman who's built an empire by being underestimated. I think you'll recognize her tactics better than anyone else on our roster." He slid the document across the desk. Maya read the mission brief. Location: undisclosed Middle Eastern country. Target: a logistics coordinator funneling weapons to extremist groups. Cover: assistant to the regional security officer. Duration: 6 weeks. "This is jumping way ahead of my training timeline," Maya said. "It is," Grant agreed. "And if you're not ready, you say no and continue the standard pipeline. No penalties. No stigma. This is an opportunity, not a requirement." Maya looked at the mission parameters again. 6 weeks embedded in hostile territory, pretending to be someone she wasn't, evaluating a target who'd built her power by being invisible to the men around her. It was exactly the kind of operation she'd been training for, except she'd only been training for 3 months. "How long do I have to decide?" Maya asked. "Wheels up in 72 hours, Grant said. "If you're going, you need to decide by tomorrow morning so we can brief you on cover identity and operational parameters." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Carter, I'm going to tell you something I don't usually share with candidates this early. The reason we have a 100% graduation rate isn't because we're good at selecting people who won't quit. It's because we only recruit people who are already operators. They just don't know it yet. Our job isn't to make you into something new. It's to help you become what you already are. He left. Maya sat alone with the mission brief, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down. 3 months ago, she'd been failing basic training on purpose because she was afraid of her own capability. Now she was being offered a real-world deployment because she'd proven that capability under pressure. The transformation had happened so fast, she'd barely noticed it occurring. But looking back, she could see the path clearly. Every exercise, every scenario, every moment of pressure had been designed to show her that the person she was afraid of becoming was actually the person she'd always been. The only difference was she'd stopped running from it. Maya pulled out a pen and signed the deployment acceptance form. Then she opened her laptop and started researching everything she could find about women who built power in societies designed to make them invisible. Because in 72 hours, she'd be stepping into that world herself. And this time, she wouldn't be pretending to fail. This time, she'd be using her capability exactly as it was meant to be used, to protect people who'd never know they needed protecting, to prevent conflicts before they started, to operate in the shadows where the difference between peace and war was measured in whispered conversations and split-second decisions. The fear was still there. It probably always would be. But now she understood that the fear wasn't warning her away from danger. It was keeping her honest. And in a world where she'd soon be operating with no oversight, no backup, and no one to verify her decisions except her own conscience, that honesty was the most important weapon she possessed. Maya closed the laptop and finally let herself sleep. Tomorrow, she'd start preparing for her first real mission. Tonight, she'd accept that the person she'd been terrified of becoming was exactly who the world needed her to be. The C-130 transport banked over desert that looked like wrinkled copper under the late afternoon sun. Maya sat in the cargo bay wearing civilian clothes that felt wrong after months in combat gear. A conservative business suit, modest jewelry, her hair pulled back in a style that suggested administrative efficiency rather than tactical capability. Her cover identity was solid on paper. Jessica Morgan, contract administrative specialist assigned to support the regional security officer at the American consulate in Zarakabad. 26 years old, bachelor's degree in international relations, 2 years of State Department experience in low-threat posts. The kind of person who processed paperwork and coordinated meetings while the real operators did the actual work. Exactly the kind of person nobody would suspect of being a covert intelligence asset. Sitting across from her was her handler for the operation, a woman who'd introduced herself simply as Control, and who'd spent the last 8 hours of flight drilling Maya on cover maintenance, communication protocols, and the cardinal rule of observation missions. Never compromise your position for any reason. Your target is Amira Kassab, Control said, reviewing the brief one final time. On paper, she's a transportation logistics coordinator, moves commercial goods across borders, maintains relationships with customs officials, runs a legitimate business. In reality, she's the primary facilitator for weapons transfers to 3 separate extremist organizations. Control pulled up surveillance photos on a tablet. The woman in the images was maybe 40, wearing business attire that navigated the cultural tension between professional necessity and traditional modesty. Her face was intelligent, composed, revealing nothing. Kassab has survived in this environment for 12 years, Control continued. She's never been arrested, never been compromised, never made a mistake we could exploit. She operates in plain sight because everyone underestimates her. Men see a woman playing at business. Women see someone who's made peace with limited options. Nobody sees the architect. Maya studied the photos. What's my specific tasking? Observe her patterns, document her meetings, identify her network. We need to understand how she operates before we can disrupt her operations. Control looked up. But here's the critical part. Kassab is paranoid about foreign intelligence. She's burned 3 separate attempts to infiltrate her organization. If she suspects you're anything other than exactly what your cover says you are, she'll disappear and we'll lose our only window into her network. So no active measures, Maya said. Pure observation. Exactly. You're a diplomatic administrator who happens to work in the same building where Kassab occasionally does business. You're boring, forgettable, the kind of person she'll ignore completely. The loadmaster signaled 5 minutes to landing. Control packed away the tablet. One more thing, your RSO, Regional Security Officer, doesn't know you're an intelligence asset. As far as he's concerned, you're exactly what your paperwork says. He's former diplomatic security service, competent but conventional. Don't give him any reason to look deeper. Maya felt the familiar weight of operational deception settling over her shoulders. She'd be lying to everyone, her target, her supposed colleagues, even the people who thought they were supervising her. Welcome to the gray spaces. The aircraft touched down on a runway that shimmered with heat. Through the cargo bay window, Maya could see Zarakabad spreading across the desert, a city where ancient architecture collided with modern construction, where satellite dishes sprouted from clay buildings, where the weight of history and the chaos of present-day conflict created exactly the kind of environment where someone like Amira Kassab could thrive. Dessam. The American consulate occupied a fortified compound in the diplomatic quarter. Blast walls, checkpoints, Marines in body armor standing post. Maya processed through security with her cover credentials and was escorted to the RSO's office by a junior diplomat who talked about the weather and local restaurants without once asking what she actually did. Regional Security Officer David Holbrook was exactly what Control had described. Mid-40s, competent, professional, and thoroughly unimaginative. He greeted Maya with a firm handshake and immediately started explaining her duties. You'll be coordinating security briefings for visiting delegations, maintaining our liaison database, and processing visa security clearances, Holbrook said, gesturing to a desk piled with folders. Standard administrative work. Nothing glamorous, but essential to our operations. Understood, sir, Maya replied, adopting the tone of someone grateful for any job that involved air conditioning. The local staff will get you set up. Weekly check-ins with me every Monday. Questions? Just one. I saw in the briefing materials that we maintain relationships with local business leaders for security liaison purposes. Is there a list of approved contacts? Holbrook pulled up a document on his computer. There's about 40 people we work with regularly. Import-export coordinators, security contractors, transportation specialists, anyone who might have information about threats to American interests. He scrolled down the list. Maya spotted Kassab's name immediately. Amira Kassab, Kassab Transportation Solutions, cleared for routine business liaison. I notice this list includes women business owners, Maya said carefully. Is that common here? More common than you'd think, Holbrook replied. The culture has restrictions, sure, but money talks in any language. Kassab runs one of the most efficient logistics operations in the region. We use her services occasionally for approved cargo transfers. Perfect. Her target wasn't just accessible. She was already integrated into the consulate's routine operations. I'll familiarize myself with the contacts, Maya said. When do people typically conduct business here? Mornings, usually. Afternoon prayer, but before the heat gets unbearable. Holbrook stood, signaling the meeting was over. Get settled. Your first real day starts tomorrow. Maya's quarters were a small apartment in the consulate compound, secure, comfortable, completely isolated from the actual city beyond the walls. She unpacked her cover identity carefully, setting out the kinds of personal items Jessica Morgan would own. Photos of a fictional family, a dog-eared paperback novel, toiletries from American drugstores. Then she activated her covert communication device, a modified smartphone that looked identical to a standard civilian model but encrypted all transmissions through a satellite network Control could monitor. She typed a brief message. In position, target confirmed accessible through normal liaison channels. Beginning observation tomorrow. The reply came 3 minutes later. Copy. Maintain cover. Report every 72 hours unless critical development. Maya deleted both messages and set the phone aside. Then she sat on the edge of her bed and let herself process what she was actually doing. 3 months ago, she'd been the worst recruit in basic training. Now she was operating solo in hostile territory under deep cover, preparing to observe a target who'd successfully evaded intelligence services for over a decade. The transformation still felt surreal. But when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see the terrified recruit who'd missed shots on purpose. She saw someone who'd accepted a simple truth. Capability was neutral. What mattered was how you chose to use it. Tomorrow, she'd begin using hers. Amira Kassab arrived at the consulate at 0930 hours, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a business suit that somehow managed to be both professionally Western and culturally appropriate. She moved through security with practiced ease, signed in with the front desk, and was escorted to a meeting room where Holbrook was reviewing cargo manifests with another local contractor. Maya watched from her desk across the lobby, pretending to work on visa paperwork while actually cataloging everything about Kassab's behavior. The woman was calm, confident. She shook hands with Holbrook like an equal, not deferential, not aggressive, just professional. Her Arabic had a Damascus accent, educated but not elite. When she spoke English, it was fluent with barely a trace of accent, someone who deliberately cultivated the ability to exist in multiple cultural contexts without fully belonging to any of them. Maya recognized the strategy because she'd just spent 3 months learning to do exactly the same thing. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. When Kassab emerged, she paused at the front desk to confirm her next appointment, then headed for the exit. Maya made her first operational decision. She stood, grabbed a folder of meaningless paperwork, and walked toward the exit at the same time, timing her movement to coincide with Kassab's departure. They reached the security checkpoint simultaneously. "After you," Maya said in Arabic, gesturing politely. Kassab glanced at her, a brief assessment, nothing more. "Thank you," she replied in English, clearly noting Maya's American accent in her Arabic. "Your English is excellent," Maya said, switching languages. "Business requirement," Kassab said with a slight smile. "Are you new to the consulate?" "Just arrived. Administrative specialist. Still learning my way around." "Welcome to Zarakabad." Kassab's tone was pleasant but distant, the social minimum required by courtesy, nothing more. She collected her belongings from security and headed for the parking area. Maya had maybe 5 seconds of interaction, but she'd learned 3 critical things. Kassab was comfortable in the consulate environment, she engaged in small talk only when socially necessary, and she'd already categorized Maya as harmless administrative staff, not worth further attention. Exactly according to plan. Over the next 2 weeks, Maya established a pattern of brief, unremarkable interactions with Kassab during her visits to the consulate. A polite greeting in the lobby, a comment about the weather, an occasional question about local business customs that Jessica Morgan would reasonably ask. Each interaction was forgettable by design, but each one gave Maya another data point. She learned that Kassab arrived precisely on time for every appointment, that she never conducted business over phone calls within the consulate, that she maintained professional warmth with everyone but genuine familiarity with no one. And she learned that Kassab had a habit of visiting a specific cafe in the Old Quarter every Thursday afternoon. That was the opening Maya needed. On the 3rd Thursday, Maya positioned herself at the same cafe, not at Kassab's table, but at a separate table across the courtyard, reading a book and drinking tea like any off-duty American trying to experience local culture. Kassab arrived at her usual time, ordered her usual mint tea, and sat alone reviewing documents. Maya waited 20 minutes, then stood to leave. As she passed Kassab's table, she stumbled slightly, a deliberate misstep that sent her book tumbling near Kassab's feet. "I'm so sorry," Maya said, retrieving the book. Kassab looked up, recognition flickering across her face. "The new administrator from the consulate. Jessica Morgan." Maya gestured to the book, a popular novel in Arabic translation. "I'm trying to improve my reading skills. Clearly, I should work on my walking skills too." A hint of genuine amusement touched Kassab's expression. "That's ambitious reading for someone still learning Arabic." "My teacher says I need to challenge myself." Maya hesitated, then took a calculated risk. "I don't suppose you'd mind if I asked you a question about a phrase I can't quite translate." Kassab studied her for a moment. Maya could feel herself being evaluated, categorized, filed away under harmless foreign worker making clumsy cultural overtures. "Sit," Kassab said finally. "But only for a moment. I have another appointment." Maya sat, opening the book to a passage she'd carefully marked. "This phrase here. I understand the literal translation, but I think there's an idiomatic meaning I'm missing." Kassab read the passage and smiled slightly. The literal translation is, "The fox praises the trap before escaping it." The idiom means someone who appears grateful for their captivity while secretly planning their freedom. "That's beautifully cynical," Maya said. "That's survival wisdom." Kassab closed the book and handed it back. In our culture, there are many phrases about appearing one way while being another. It's how people have endured centuries of occupation, colonization, and imposed authority. Maya recognized the subtle dig at American presence, but didn't take the bait. "I'm learning that humility is more valuable than confidence here." "Not just here," Kassab replied. "Anywhere women do business in men's worlds." The comment hung in the air, an acknowledgement of shared experience, carefully measured to reveal nothing while establishing minimal common ground. Maya stood. "Thank you for the lesson. I should let you get to your meeting." "You're welcome." Kassab returned to her documents, already dismissing Maya from her attention. But as Maya left the cafe, she felt the weight of Kassab's gaze tracking her departure. A final assessment, checking whether the harmless administrator might be something else. Maya walked with the slightly uncertain gait of someone still uncomfortable in foreign terrain, maintaining her cover all the way back to the compound. That night, she reported the interaction to Control, established initial contact with Target, cover holding. Target exhibits expected operational security awareness, but appears to accept cover identity. The reply was immediate. "Good work. Continue gradual cultivation. Do not accelerate contact frequency." But the operation accelerated anyway, and not because of anything Maya did. 4 days after the cafe meeting, an explosion ripped through a police checkpoint 3 blocks from the consulate. 5 dead, 12 wounded. The attack bore the hallmarks of one of the extremist groups Kassab was suspected of supplying. Holbrook locked down the consulate and implemented emergency security protocols. Non-essential staff were confined to quarters. All local liaison contacts were suspended pending security review, which meant Maya lost access to the one asset she'd spent 2 weeks cultivating. She was sitting in her apartment reviewing her observation notes when her covert phone vibrated with an incoming message. Situation change. Target accelerated operations timeline following attack. Surveillance indicates major meeting scheduled 72 hours from now. Location, TBD. Maya stared at the message, her operational instincts immediately recognizing the problem. If Kassab was meeting with high-value contacts in response to the attack, it meant she was coordinating something significant. But with the consulate locked down, Maya had no legitimate reason to be anywhere near Kassab. She typed back, "Unable to maintain observation under current security restrictions. Require authorization for off-compound movement." The reply came after a longer pause. Negative. Cover security takes priority. Maintain position and report any developments through normal liaison channels. Maya read the message 3 times, then made a decision that would either prove she was ready for this work or confirm she'd been deployed too early. She deleted the message and started planning how to break the rules she'd been given. The next morning, Maya approached Holbrook in his office. "Sir, I need to request an exception to the compound restriction." Holbrook looked up from his security briefing, clearly not expecting to be challenged. "Exception? We're in heightened threat posture, Morgan. Nobody goes off compound without mission-essential justification." "I understand, sir, but I have a meeting scheduled with Amira Kassab, the logistics coordinator, to review transportation contracts for the upcoming delegation visit. She's already confirmed the appointment. If I cancel, it could damage our relationship with one of our most reliable local contractors." It was a complete lie. There was no scheduled meeting, no delegation visit requiring transportation contracts. But Holbrook didn't know that, and the bureaucratic language of contractor relationships and scheduled appointments was exactly the kind of administrative detail he'd want handled properly. Holbrook frowned. "Can it be rescheduled?" "I tried, sir. She said this week is her only availability before she travels to Dubai for a trade conference. If we postpone, we'll have to find alternative transportation solutions with less reliable vendors." Maya watched Holbrook weigh the options. Maintain absolute security posture versus maintain critical business relationships. The eternal tension of diplomatic security. "Where's the meeting?" he asked. "Her office in the commercial district. 30 minutes each way, 1 hour for the meeting. I'll take a consulate vehicle and maintain radio contact throughout." Holbrook studied her for a long moment. Maya kept her expression neutral, just an administrator trying to do her job competently, nothing more. "Fine," he said finally, "but you take a security escort, one of the local guards, non-negotiable." "Yes, sir. Thank you." Maya left his office before he could reconsider, her heart pounding. She'd just committed to a meeting that didn't exist with a target who didn't know she was coming, all while violating her handler's direct orders to maintain position. If this went wrong, her career in the program would end before it really started. If it went right, she might actually accomplish what she'd been sent here to do. Tian, Kassab's office was in a four-story building that housed a dozen other small businesses: import-export companies, freight forwarders, customs brokers. The kind of place where money moved across borders in forms that were technically legal but morally ambiguous. Maya arrived with her security escort, a local guard named Rashid, who spoke minimal English and seemed primarily interested in his phone, and took the stairs to the third floor. Kassab Transportation Solutions occupied a modest suite with 2 desks, filing cabinets, and a small private office where Amira Kassab sat reviewing paperwork. She looked up when Maya entered, surprise flickering across her face. "Ms. Morgan, I wasn't expecting you." "I apologize for the short notice," Maya said smoothly. "I tried to call but couldn't get through. I'm coordinating transportation for an upcoming delegation visit and wanted to discuss contract options." It was a test. If Kassab accepted the explanation without question, it meant Maya's cover was solid. If she challenged the story, it meant she'd already identified inconsistencies. Kassab studied her for 3 full seconds, an eternity in social interaction. Then she smiled slightly. "Of course. Please, sit." Maya sat, pulling out a notebook with fabricated delegation details she'd prepared that morning. For the next 20 minutes, they discussed transportation logistics that would never happen. Kassab quoted rates. Maya asked about vehicle capacity and driver experience. They negotiated terms for a service that would never be rendered. The entire conversation was theater. But through the office window, Maya could see into the outer room where Kassab's assistant was on the phone, speaking rapidly in Arabic. And on Kassab's desk, partially visible, was a handwritten note with a time and location. 1900 hours, Al Rashid Warehouse District, the meeting control had mentioned. 72 hours from the attack, exactly as predicted. Maya kept talking about fictional transportation needs while photographing that note with her eyes, committing every detail to memory. When the meeting concluded, Kassab walked her to the door. "Thank you for coming all this way," Kassab said. Her tone was polite, but her eyes were calculating. "Though I must say, it's unusual for the consulate to send administrators out during heightened security." There it was, the gentle probe, testing whether Maya's story held up under scrutiny. "Mr. Holbrook felt maintaining our contractor relationships was important enough to justify the risk," Maya replied. "Plus, I had a security escort." She gestured to Rashid, who was still engrossed in his phone. Kassab's expression didn't change, but Maya sensed the assessment continuing. "I'll have the contract ready for your review by next week." "Perfect. Thank you for your time." Maya descended the stairs, maintaining her administrator persona until she was back in the consulate vehicle. Only when they were moving through traffic did she allow herself to process what she'd just done. She'd compromised her cover security to obtain intelligence on a meeting that could reveal Kassab's entire network. She'd violated her handler's orders. She'd risked exposure for information she couldn't even verify was accurate. And she'd do it again without hesitation because that's what operators did. They made judgment calls in the moment and lived with the consequences. Back at the compound, she sent an encrypted message to Control, obtained intelligence on target meeting. Al Rashid Warehouse District, 1900 hours, date +1, request authorization for surveillance. The reply came 6 hours later, and it wasn't from Control. It was from Commander Grant. Report to Secure Communications immediately. The Secure Communications room was a soundproof booth in the consulate basement, equipped with encrypted video conferencing that couldn't be intercepted or recorded. Maya sat alone in the booth, waiting for the connection to establish. Grant's face appeared on screen, his expression unreadable. "Candidate Carter," he said. No warmth, no greeting, just her title and name. "Sir, you violated direct orders from your handler. You created a fabricated meeting without authorization. You exposed yourself to a target who's known for identifying intelligence assets. And you did all of this 3 months into your training." His voice was flat, controlled. "Explain." Maya had prepared for this. "Sir, the intelligence opportunity had a limited window. Waiting for authorization would have meant missing the only chance to identify Kassab's network before her meeting occurred. I assessed that the risk to cover was acceptable given the potential intelligence value." "You assessed," Grant repeated. 3 months ago, you were failing basic rifle qualification. Now you're making solo operational decisions in denied territory." "Yes, sir." "And what if Kassab identified you as an intelligence asset, What if your fabricated meeting aroused enough suspicion that she changed her plans? What if your security escort reported unusual behavior to his local contacts? Maya met his eyes through the screen. Then I would have failed the mission and accepted the consequences. But I made the call that gave us the highest probability of mission success, just like you trained me to do. Grant was silent for a long moment. What did you observe during the meeting? He asked finally. Maya recited every detail, the note on the desk, the assistant's phone call, the way Kassab had probed her cover story. She described Kassab's body language, her micro-expressions, the calculated pauses that suggested ongoing assessment. When she finished, Grant leaned back in his chair. That intelligence checks against signals intercepts we received 4 hours ago, he said. Kassab is meeting with representatives from 2 separate extremist organizations to coordinate a larger operation. Your observation confirms the location and timeline. He paused. Which means your unauthorized action just gave us the exact intelligence we needed to potentially prevent a major attack. Maya felt her chest tighten. Sir, Don't apologize, Grant interrupted. Apologizing for making a good call is what administrators do. Operators own their decisions. His expression softened slightly. But here's what you need to understand, Carter. You were right this time. The intelligence was valuable, your cover held, and you made a judgment call that worked. But the reason we have protocols is because most judgment calls in the field don't work. Most unauthorized actions compromise operations. Most candidates who do what you just did end up burned, captured, or dead. I understand, sir. Do you? Grant leaned forward. Because what I'm seeing is someone who's exceptionally talented and dangerously inexperienced. You have the skills of a 5-year operator packed into 3 months of training. That makes you effective. But it also makes you reckless, because you haven't failed enough times to understand the cost of failure. The words landed hard. Maya had been so focused on proving her capability that she hadn't considered what would happen when that capability wasn't enough. Here's what happens next, Grant said. We're pulling you out of Zarakabad. Your cover is still intact, but we're not risking it further. You'll return to Black Ridge, complete your training pipeline on schedule, and learn all the lessons about operational discipline that you're currently skipping over because you think being good at the work is the same as being ready for the work. Maya's stomach sank. Sir, the intelligence I gathered will be actioned by graduated operators who've been doing this for years, Grant said firmly. You did your job. You got us what we needed. But you're not ready to see this through to the end, no matter how talented you are. He pulled up a document on his screen. This is your training evaluation, he said. Technical proficiency, exceptional. Tactical judgment, above standard. Operational discipline, needs significant improvement. You're being pulled from field deployment and returned to classroom instruction in intelligence craft, operational planning, and decision-making frameworks. Maya felt the weight of disappointment crushing down. She'd taken a risk, it had paid off, and now she was being punished for success. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. This feels like I'm being penalized for making the right call. Grant's expression hardened. You're being protected from yourself, because the next time you make an unauthorized call, you might not be right. And in this work, being wrong once can get a lot of people killed. He paused. You have extraordinary capability, Carter, but capability without discipline is just a bomb waiting to go off. We need to make sure you understand when to use that capability and when to hold it in reserve. The screen flickered as the connection began to degrade. Your extraction is scheduled for 0600 tomorrow, Grant said. Pack your cover identity, sanitize your quarters, and prepare for debrief upon arrival at Black Ridge. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Good. And Carter? Sir? You did well. Better than we expected for a first deployment. But better than expected doesn't mean ready for solo operations. Learn from this. Grow from it. And when you deploy again, and you will deploy again, you'll do so with the experience to know the difference between a good risk and a reckless one. The connection terminated. Maya sat alone in the secure communications booth, processing everything that had just happened. She'd succeeded at her mission. She'd gathered critical intelligence. She'd maintained her cover under pressure, and she was being pulled out anyway. The rational part of her brain understood Grant's reasoning. She was 3 months into an 18-month program. She'd violated protocols. She'd taken risks that could have compromised everything. But the part of her that had spent 3 months proving she was more capable than anyone expected, that part felt like she was being punished for being exactly what they'd trained her to become. She stood and left the communications room, heading back to her quarters to begin packing. Rashid, her security escort, was waiting in the hallway. "Miss Morgan," he said in halting English, "I must speak with you." Maya's operational instincts fired immediately. "What is it?" Rashid glanced around nervously, then handed her a folded piece of paper. "A woman asked me to give you this. She said you would understand." Maya unfolded the note. It was written in English, in handwriting she recognized from the documents she'd seen on Kassab's desk. "You are not what you pretend to be. Neither am I. If you want to understand why, come to the cafe Thursday afternoon. Alone." Maya's blood ran cold. Kassab knew. The carefully constructed cover, the months of training, the operational security protocols, all of it had been penetrated by a target who'd survived 12 years in this environment by being better at deception than the people hunting her. And now she was reaching out. Maya looked at Rashid. "When did she give you this?" 2 hours ago, after you left her office. Which meant Kassab had identified Maya as an intelligence asset during their meeting, processed the implications, and decided to make contact rather than disappear. The question was why. Maya had 12 hours before her extraction. 12 hours to decide whether to ignore the message and return to Blackridge, or take one more unauthorized risk to find out what Amira Kassab actually wanted. She thought about Grant's warning, about operational discipline, about the difference between good risks and reckless ones. Then she thought about the note she'd seen on Kassab's desk, about the meeting that could prevent an attack, about the people who would die if that intelligence wasn't acted upon quickly enough. And she made a decision that would either prove she understood this work or confirm she had no business doing it. She looked at Rashid. "Tell her I'll be there." The cafe was nearly empty when Maya arrived Thursday afternoon. Kassab sat at the same table as before, 2 cups of mint tea already waiting. Maya approached carefully, scanning for threats, assessing exit routes, calculating the 100 ways this could be a trap. She sat down. "You came," Kassab said quietly. "That was either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both," Maya replied. Kassab smiled slightly. "I knew what you were the moment you stumbled near my table. No one reads Arabic literature that poorly while also understanding idiomatic phrases perfectly. You were testing me, seeing if I would help a struggling foreigner or dismiss you as insignificant." Maya said nothing. "And then you appeared at my office with a fictional meeting about a delegation that doesn't exist," Kassab continued. "That was when I knew for certain. The Americans had sent someone to watch me." "Well, if you knew I was intelligence, why didn't you disappear?" "Because I wanted to see what kind of person they would send." Kassab sipped her tea. "Most American intelligence officers are arrogant. They believe their training makes them superior to local operators. They make mistakes. They leave patterns. They think they're invisible when they're actually quite obvious. But I wasn't obvious." "You were different," Kassab said. "You understood something most of your colleagues miss, that the most effective deception is making people ignore you entirely. You didn't try to be clever. You tried to be boring. That takes discipline most intelligence officers never develop." Maya felt like she was having a conversation in a language she barely spoke. "Why are you telling me this?" Kassab set down her tea and looked directly at Maya. "Because the meeting your people think I'm attending tomorrow night? It's a trap. The extremist organizations know they're being watched. They've set up a false meeting to identify your surveillance assets. Anyone who shows up will be photographed, tracked, and targeted." Maya's chest tightened. "Why would you warn us?" "Because I'm not what your intelligence reports say I am," Kassab replied quietly. "I don't supply weapons to extremists. I identify their networks and report them to my actual employers, the intelligence service you've been trying so hard not to name." The world tilted. Maya stared at the woman across from her, her operational understanding completely inverted. Kassab wasn't a target, she was an asset, and Maya had just spent 2 weeks surveilling someone who was working for the same ultimate goals, just through different channels. "I don't understand," Maya said. "If you're an intelligence asset, why didn't you identify yourself through proper channels?" "Because your people don't know I exist," Kassab said. "I work for a service that prefers deniability. We share intelligence when it suits us, but we don't share sources. Your operation to observe me put both of us at risk, you from the extremists who would kill you if they knew what you were, and me from the Americans who might compromise my cover by treating me as a confirmed asset." She leaned forward slightly. "I'm telling you this because you remind me of myself 12 years ago. talented, capable, absolutely convinced that your capability made you ready for this work. Her expression softened. You're not ready. Neither was I. And the only reason I survived long enough to become effective was because someone warned me that being good at deception isn't the same as understanding when deception fails. Maya felt the words cut deeper than Grant's reprimand. What do you want me to do? She asked. Go home, Kasab said simply. Complete your training. Learn all the lessons you're currently too talented to think you need. And when you come back, and you will come back because this work chooses certain people, remember that the world is full of operators like us. Some work for your side, some work for their own side, and some work in the spaces between where the only loyalty is to preventing the kind of violence that destroys everyone. She stood, leaving money for the tea. The Americans will extract you tomorrow. Let them. And tell your Commander Grant that the meeting tomorrow is compromised. Your surveillance teams should stand down unless they want to hand the extremists a list of your intelligence assets. How do you know Grant's name? Kasab smiled. The same way I knew you weren't really an administrator. This work requires seeing what others miss. She walked toward the exit, then paused. One more thing, Jessica Morgan, or whoever you actually are. You have a gift for this work. Don't waste it by being reckless. The world needs operators who understand that the best victories are the ones where nobody dies because nobody ever knew there was a fight. Then she was gone. Maya sat alone at the table, staring at 2 cups of mint tea and processing the fact that everything she thought she knew about this operation had been wrong. She pulled out her covert phone and composed a message to Grant. Critical intelligence. Tomorrow's meeting is compromised. Target is friendly asset working for Allied service. Surveillance team should abort to prevent exposure. The reply came immediately. Extract on schedule. Full debrief in person. Maya deleted the messages and left the cafe. Somewhere in this city, Amira Kasab was returning to her office, preparing to continue work that would never be acknowledged, preventing violence that would never be reported, operating in shadows where success meant nothing happened at all. And Maya finally understood what Torres had meant about operators versus weapons. Weapons just destroyed targets. Operators understood when destruction was necessary and when it wasn't. And the rarest operators of all were the ones who could operate their entire careers without ever firing a shot, because they'd prevented the situations where shots needed to be fired. Maya walked back to the consulate compound as the sun set over Zarkabad, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow, she'd return to Blackridge. She'd complete her training. She'd learn operational discipline and decision-making frameworks and all the lessons she'd been too capable to think she needed. And eventually, she'd deploy again. But next time she'd do so understanding that being good at violence was only valuable if you were better at preventing it. Because the people who looked weakest, the administrators, the logistics coordinators, the forgettable functionaries everyone ignored, were sometimes the ones strong enough to question their own strength. And the quietest victories really were the ones where nothing happened at all. The extraction flight left Zarkabad at 0612 hours, climbing through dawn light that turned the desert gold. Maya sat in the cargo bay of the C-130, still wearing Jessica Morgan's civilian clothes, still carrying a cover identity that no longer mattered. Across from her sat Control, reviewing mission reports on a tablet. She hadn't spoken since they'd boarded. Finally, as the aircraft leveled off at cruising altitude, Control looked up. Commander Grant briefed me on your unauthorized contact with the target, she said. Her tone was carefully neutral. And on the intelligence she provided about the compromised meeting. Maya waited. That intelligence saved 6 surveillance assets from exposure, Control continued. The meeting was exactly as Kasab described, a setup designed to identify American intelligence officers. If our teams had been in position, they would have been photographed and targeted. So the operation was successful, Maya said. The intelligence outcome was successful, Control corrected. The operational discipline was catastrophic. You violated direct orders, exposed yourself to a hostile contact, and made decisions that could have resulted in your capture or death. Maya felt the weight of those words but didn't look away. And if I'd followed orders, 6 operators would currently be compromised. Control set down the tablet. You don't get it yet, do you? This isn't about whether you were right. It's about whether you can be trusted to operate within a command structure when the stakes are real. She leaned forward. You're talented, Carter. Exceptionally so. But talent without discipline just makes you a liability we can't afford to deploy. The words stung because they were true. Maya had been operating on instinct and capability, making calls that happened to work, but without the framework to know when those calls would fail. What happens now? Maya asked. Now you complete your training, Control said. All 18 months, no shortcuts, no early deployments. You learn operational discipline the hard way, through classroom instruction, scenario planning, and understanding that most intelligence work isn't making brilliant intuitive leaps. It's following protocols that keep you alive when intuition fails. She pulled up a file on the tablet. Amira Kassab sent a message through back channels, Control said. She wanted you to know something. Maya's pulse quickened. What? That you remind her of herself at your age? Talented, reckless, and convinced that capability was enough. Control's expression softened slightly. She also said that the only reason she's still alive after 12 years is because someone forced her to learn discipline before her talent got her killed. She hopes Commander Grant will do the same for you. The aircraft hit turbulence, shaking the cargo bay. Maya gripped her seat and thought about the woman in the cafe. Operating for 12 years in an environment that killed most intelligence assets within months, maintaining cover so deep that even Allied services didn't know she existed. That wasn't talent. That was mastery built on foundations Maya hadn't even started to construct. I understand, Maya said quietly. Control studied her. I hope you do. Because when you complete your training, and you will complete it, you'll deploy again. And next time, the people you're watching won't be friendly assets giving you warnings. They'll be actual threats who'll kill you the moment they suspect what you are. The rest of the flight passed in silence. Blackridge Mountain looked the same when Maya arrived, but she felt different walking through its gates. 3 months ago, she'd been a candidate desperate to prove herself. Now she was a candidate who'd proven herself reckless. Commander Grant was waiting in the briefing room. Candidate Carter, he said. Sit. Maya sat. Grant pulled up footage on the tactical display surveillance video from Zarakabad, showing Maya entering Kassab's office, the cafe meeting, her final conversation with the target. Let's review your deployment, Grant said. You established cover effectively. You identified the target's patterns. You obtained intelligence through gradual cultivation, all textbook approaches. He paused the video on the frame of Maya sitting across from Kassab at the cafe. Then you fabricated a meeting without authorization, violated your handler's direct orders, and exposed yourself to a target who identified you as an intelligence asset within 2 weeks. His voice was steady, but hard. Do you understand how badly this could have gone? Yes, sir. I don't think you do. Grant zoomed in on Kassab's face in the video. This woman has survived 12 years in one of the most dangerous intelligence environments in the world. She's maintained cover so effective that even Allied services don't acknowledge her existence. She operates at a level you won't reach for a decade, if ever. He turned to face Maya directly. And she identified you in 2 weeks. Not because you made obvious mistakes, but because you're not yet good enough to hide from someone operating at her level. You thought you were running the operation. She was running you the entire time, evaluating whether you were a threat or an opportunity. The words hit like physical blows. Maya had thought she'd been clever, adaptive, effective. Instead, she'd been completely outmaneuvered by an operator who'd been playing a deeper game. The only reason you're sitting here instead of in an enemy prison is because Kassab decided you were more valuable as a warning than a trophy, Grant continued. She could have exposed you to her extremist contacts. Instead, she gave you intelligence that saved American lives and sent you home with a lesson about your own limitations. Maya felt her chest tighten. Sir, Don't apologize, Grant interrupted. And don't make excuses. What I need from you is a simple answer. Do you understand why you failed? Maya thought about the question, really thought about it. I failed because I thought being good at the work meant I was ready for the work, she said finally. I had the skills but not the judgment, the capability but not the wisdom. I made decisions based on what I could do instead of what I should do. Grant nodded slowly. That's the most honest thing you've said since you arrived at this program. And it's why you're going to complete the full training pipeline instead of being sent home. He pulled up a new training schedule. 15 months remaining: intelligence craft, operational planning, decision-making frameworks, psychological conditioning, cultural immersion, advanced tradecraft. Every single lesson designed to teach you what Kassab learned over 12 years, That capability is worthless if you don't know when to use it and when to walk away. He looked at her directly. You have exceptional potential, Carter, but potential just means you could be great or you could get people killed. The next 15 months will determine which one you become. The training that followed was harder than anything Maya had experienced before, not because the physical challenges were more demanding. She'd already proven she could handle those. It was hard because it forced her to confront the gap between her capabilities and her judgment. Intelligence craft instructor Sarah Chen was a 20-year CIA veteran who'd operated in denied areas across 3 continents. She taught Maya that most intelligence work wasn't dramatic confrontations or clever deceptions. It was patient cultivation of sources, meticulous documentation of patterns, and the discipline to report what you observed rather than what you hoped to find. You want to be James Bond, Chen said during one particularly brutal session. Fast, clever, always making the brilliant intuitive leap. But real intelligence work is being the boring accountant who notices that someone's expense reports don't match their claimed travel. It's unsexy, unglamorous, and it's what actually keeps people alive. She made Maya spend 2 weeks analyzing financial records to identify a single suspicious transaction. No action, no confrontation. Just patient analysis that revealed a funding network supporting extremist operations. That's intelligence work, Chen said when Maya finally found it. Not the cafe meeting with the mysterious asset. The spreadsheet review that nobody will ever know about. Operational planning was taught by a former SEAL named Marcus Webb, who'd planned missions in environments where a single mistake meant everyone died. You think planning is boring, Webb said. You want to be adaptive, flexible, making decisions in the moment. But you know what adaptive operators do? They die when their brilliant improvisation runs into a situation they didn't anticipate. He made Maya plan the same operation 50 different ways, accounting for every possible contingency. Weather changes, equipment failures, compromised sources, enemy adaptations. Each iteration revealed new vulnerabilities she hadn't considered. This is how you build judgment, Webb explained, by planning so thoroughly that when you have to improvise, you're working from a foundation of understanding instead of just guessing and hoping you're right. But the hardest training came from Torres, who returned to teach advanced decision-making frameworks. You're going to face situations where every choice is wrong, Torres said, where taking action gets people killed and doing nothing gets different people killed, where you have to choose between compromising your mission and compromising your principles. She put Maya through scenario after scenario designed to have no good answers. Hostage situations where saving one person meant dooming others. Intelligence opportunities that required abandoning assets. Mission objectives that conflicted with moral imperatives. And every time Maya made a choice, Torres forced her to articulate why. Not just what she decided, but the framework she used to reach that decision. Instinct isn't enough, Torres said. You need a decision-making structure that works even when you're exhausted, scared, and running out of time, because that's when you'll be making the choices that define who you actually are. 9 months into her resume training, Maya was running an urban surveillance exercise when everything she'd learned came together. The scenario was simple. Track a target through a major city, identify their contacts, and report their activities without being detected. Standard surveillance work. Maya's target was an instructor playing the role of an arms dealer. She'd been tracking him for 6 hours through crowded streets, maintaining proper distance, rotating positions, documenting his movements. Then the target did something unexpected. He entered a cafe, sat down with a woman Maya didn't recognize, and after 5 minutes of conversation, handed her a package. The package wasn't in the scenario briefing. The woman wasn't a known contact, and Maya had a choice: maintain pure surveillance as instructed or investigate the unexpected development. 3 months ago, she would have followed her instincts and investigated. Now she maintained surveillance, documented the exchange, and reported it through proper channels. When the exercise ended, Torres pulled her aside. The package was a test, Torres said. We wanted to see if you'd break surveillance protocol to chase something that looked important. You didn't. You followed the mission parameters and reported what you observed. It felt wrong, Maya admitted, like I was missing something critical. That's the discipline talking, Torres replied. The part of your brain that knows most critical developments are either distractions or traps. The old you would have chased that package. The new you understood that sticking to your mission was more important than satisfying your curiosity. She pulled up Maya's surveillance report. This is the difference between talented and ready, Torres said. Talented means you can do impressive things. Ready means you know when not to do them. 15 months after returning from Zarakabad, Maya stood in formation for her graduation from the training pipeline. 4 candidates had completed the full program alongside her: Song, Martinez, Briggs, and 2 others who'd joined in later phases. They wore dress uniforms for the ceremony, standing in the same briefing room where they'd received their first mission briefing 18 months earlier. Commander Grant addressed them with the same measured intensity he'd shown on day 1. "You are now operators in the Special Activities Development Research Program," he said. "You have completed training that most candidates never attempt. You've proven yourselves capable of operating in denied areas, maintaining cover under pressure, and making decisions when there are no good options." He paused, looking at each of them. "But completion of training doesn't mean you're finished learning. Every operation will teach you something new. Every mistake will cost you something valuable. And every success will be measured not by what you accomplished, but by what you prevented." He pulled up a tactical display showing deployments across the globe. "You'll be assigned to teams operating in gray spaces where traditional military force is too blunt and diplomatic solutions are too slow. You'll build relationships, gather intelligence, and occasionally take direct action. But your primary mission is prevention, stopping conflicts before they start, neutralizing threats before they materialize, and protecting people who will never know you exist." Grant gestured to Torres, who stepped forward carrying a small wooden box. "Each operator receives an identifier," Torres said. "Not a name, not a rank, just a designation used in classified communications. You'll never use this identifier in the field. It exists only to track your operations in systems that officially don't exist." She opened the box, revealing small metal pins, each one stamped with a simple numerical designation. "Operator 0044, Torres said, handing a pin to Song. "Operator 0045, Martinez. "Operator 0046, Briggs." She reached Maya and paused. "Operator 0047. Maya took the pin. Cold metal, simple design, representing everything she'd become over 18 months of training that had broken her down and rebuilt her into something different. "Congratulations, operators," Grant said. "Your first assignments begin in 2 weeks. Use that time to prepare. And remember, the victories no one hears about are the ones that matter most." The ceremony ended. The operators dispersed to prepare for deployments they couldn't discuss with anyone outside the program. Maya was heading to her quarters when Torres caught up with her. "Walk with me," Torres said. They walked through the facility in silence, past training ranges and kill houses and classrooms where the next generation of candidates was learning lessons Maya had mastered through painful experience. "I got a message for you," Torres said finally, through back channels, "from Zarakabad." Maya's pulse quickened. "Kasab?" Torres nodded. "She wanted you to know that the network she's been infiltrating, the one your surveillance helped identify, was disrupted 3 months ago. The extremist organizations lost their primary weapons pipeline. 2 major attacks were prevented, and none of it will ever be publicly acknowledged." She handed Maya a printed message, text only, no identifying information. The administrator learned well. May she prevent many wars that nobody knows were coming. A. Maya read the message twice, feeling the weight of what it represented. Somewhere in Zarakabad, Amir Kasab was still operating in shadows, still preventing violence, still being underestimated by everyone who saw only a woman in a business suit instead of an operator who'd mastered the art of invisible warfare. And now Maya was joining that same invisible war. "You ready for your first real deployment?" Torres asked. Maya thought about the question. 18 months ago, she would have said yes immediately, confident in her capabilities and certain she was ready for anything. Now she understood that readiness wasn't about confidence. It was about humility, about knowing your limitations as well as your strengths, about understanding that the most dangerous operators were the ones who never questioned their own judgment. "I'm ready to find out if I'm ready," Maya said. Torres smiled. "That's the right answer." Putz. 2 weeks later, Maya stood in the cargo bay of a C-17 transport aircraft, heading toward her first operational deployment. The mission brief was sealed in her bag. She wouldn't open it until wheels touched down in whatever denied territory needed an operator who could blend into civilian life while secretly preventing catastrophe. She wore civilian clothes again, carried a cover identity again, was preparing to become someone else for however long the mission required, But this time felt different. This time, she wasn't trying to prove herself. She was executing a mission with the full weight of training, discipline, and judgment behind every decision. Song sat across from her in the cargo bay. They'd been assigned to the same team, operating in different roles but supporting the same objectives. "You nervous?" Song asked. Maya considered the question honestly. "Not nervous, aware." "Aware of what?" "That I'm good at this work," Maya said. "And that being good at it means I have to be even better at knowing when not to do it." Song nodded slowly. "Torres told me what happened in Zarikabad, how the target identified you and used it as a teaching moment." "She was better than me," Maya said simply. "Probably still is, but at least now I know how much I still have to learn." The aircraft began its descent. Somewhere below was a country Maya had studied but never visited, populated by people who would see her as harmless, irrelevant, exactly what her cover identity suggested. And somewhere in that country was a threat that needed to be neutralized before it became a crisis. A problem that needed solving before anyone knew it existed. A conflict that needed preventing before the first shot was ever fired. Maya stood and began her pre-deployment checks, running through protocols she'd practiced 1,000 times. Equipment, cover documentation, communication devices, backup plans layered on backup plans. The loadmaster gave the 5-minute warning. Song stood beside her. "What do you think success looks like on this deployment?" Maya thought about Amira Kassab operating for 12 years in an environment that killed most operators within months. About the attacks that never happened because intelligence assets reported threats before they materialized. About the wars prevented because someone had the judgment to de-escalate instead of engage. "Success looks like nothing happening," Maya said. "Like we complete this mission and nobody ever knows we were there. Like we go home and the world is slightly safer because of work that will never be acknowledged." The aircraft touched down. The cargo ramp began lowering, revealing a landscape Maya would operate in for the next 6 months or 6 days, however long it took to accomplish a mission that officially didn't exist. As she walked down the ramp into sunlight and unknown territory, Maya thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the firing range at Fort Carson, where she'd deliberately failed every qualification, to the mountain exercise that proved she could endure, to Zarikabad, where she'd learned the difference between capability and wisdom, to 18 months of training that had forged her into something she'd been too afraid to become. She'd started this journey terrified of her own ability to kill. She was ending it as an operator whose primary mission was preventing killing from being necessary at all. The transformation had cost her certainty, pride, and the comfortable belief that talent was enough. But it had given her something more valuable, the understanding that true strength wasn't about what you could do. It was about knowing when you shouldn't. Maya stepped onto foreign soil, activated her cover identity, and disappeared into the crowd of people who would never know an American intelligence operator was moving among them. Behind her, the aircraft powered up for departure, erasing all evidence that anyone had ever arrived. Ahead of her was a mission that would never appear in official records, generate no headlines, and receive no recognition. But somewhere in the future, people would live through days that would have been their last if someone hadn't operated in shadows to prevent the violence that never came. And that was enough. Because the people who looked weakest, the administrative assistants, the logistics coordinators, the forgettable functionaries everyone underestimated, were sometimes the ones strong enough to question their own strength. And the quietest victories really were the ones where nothing happened at all. The ones where a war was prevented before the first shot was fired. The ones where an operator completed their mission so perfectly that the world never knew there had been a mission at all. Maya Carter had spent her entire life afraid of who she might become if she stopped holding back. Now she understood that holding back, knowing when to use her capability and when to restrain it, was exactly what made her dangerous in all the right ways. She had become what the world needed her to be, an invisible guardian operating in gray spaces, a weapon who understood that the best weapons were the ones that never had to be fired, an operator whose greatest victories would be the conflicts that never happened because someone had the wisdom to prevent them. And as she disappeared into the crowd, Maya smiled, because for the first time in her life, she knew exactly who she was. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who never question their power. They're the ones brave enough to ask if that power should be used at all.